Vertical Media proudly presents Stellar Shock. An immersive audiobook podcast experience from the visionary storytellers at Vertical Media. Book 1, Embers of Rebellion.
Chapter 4, Cicatrice. Dawn crawled over the dirt fields, grey light painting the sharp lines where last night's rain had tried cutting rivulets between clumps of crop. Ser Sarrafin's boots slogged the makeshift furrows, shoes torn at the sole and leaking water, his toes itching. The ground stuck to him. Caked mud rose past the laces until each foot felt heavier than the other. He worked the row slow, body turned sideways to make up for the bad eye, everything to the left of his nose blurred behind purple swelling, and a crust of dried blood mixed with sleep grit. That eye pulsed raw with every heartbeat. A fresh cut split his eyebrow. Sweat ran through it, burning, and dripped down to stain his shirt. He kept wiping it with the back of his wrist, and the dust caked there made the pain sharp, made him bite his tongue to avoid cursing out loud. Board had tried to teach him not to whimper, so Rouse weren't neat this morning. Each pass through the field left ragged lines. He dragged the hoe behind him, every grip tugging on his calloused palms. With each swing, the blade stuttered into soil, rocks thunking and making his teeth clack together. By mid-morning, his good eye itched. His bad one screamed. He blinked rain from his brow and squinted at the sun, everything glaring too bright. His breath stunk of old meat and the salty sweat running down from his neck. He had hours left. His uncle Ward hadn't bothered with the field since dawn. The old man's boots sat by the door, crusted mud flaking off in thick curls. Ser guessed Ward had passed out somewhere with a pack of liquor, maybe at the butcher's, maybe behind the stable where the older men sat and talked about crops rotting from rut blight, their voices carrying across morning mist, always quick to hush when anyone younger passed by. By noon, with the sun branded above the trees, Ser dropped the hoe and shuffled toward a crooked tree, near the edge of the field. The shade made him pause. He leaned with his back pressed to the trunk, letting the sweat cool under his armpits, shirt glued wet on his ribs. The sandwich in his pack had smashed under his tools, and he thumbed it open, tearing bread with his teeth. Meat salt stuck to his tongue. He worked it down with gulps of water like glass scraped his throat. The iodine lingered, thick and metallic, tasted how scabs smelled, almost. He tried thinking about anything but the sour water, chewing with his teeth grinding cartilage on the edges of the sandwich, hands tracing the new tributary Balu and Viti had dug yesterday. They'd carved a reach off the irrigation ditch, small but deep, and water from the Kama River trickled through, cool to the touch, brown with silt. It wasn't clean, not by a stretch, but it'd keep the rows alive longer than last summer. He watched the glint of afternoon sun bounce off the trickle, listened to the water fall against stone, imagining for a moment those boys might come walking by again, faces still smug, fingers stained with earth, from another hour spent helping him. A nap crept up uninvited. He slid his back lower, boots threaded in grass, the field sweat drying cold from his brow. His hands made a pillow behind his head. He shut his good eye. The heat pressed in slow. Flies hummed and pecked at the bits of sandwich left at his feet. The pain around his eye faded into soft warmth. He woke sharp, heart thumping up through his jaw like he'd been punched again. The field looked empty when he blinked. Sun slid down toward the far ridge, pouring harsh yellow along rows he hadn't finished. He wiped spit from his chin, pushed himself up, and felt his thigh cramp under his weight. Nobody came. He moved back toward his work, jaw set. Later, sweat already drying on his chest, he heard broken laughter threading through the trees. 3 shapes moved through the scrub. Balu's height first, arms swinging, then Viti and Lavu, their voices carrying. Rolen trailed behind, smaller, shoulders hunched. The 3 ragged boys stomped taller weeds, cutting fresh lines towards Ser. Rolen kept his eyes low, tripping his boots over roots, always glancing back. The group split as they spotted Ser's swollen eye. Viti threw out a whistle, clicking his tongue as he stepped forward. "Whoa, ho, ho! Someone get to tusslin' with Vera! Or was it her father caught you poking around?" He grinned, showing a missing tooth, voice sharp. Lavu whistled low. "Tell me there's a real tale here, man. No way you get that banged up falling off a cart." Balu joined, chuffing a laugh through his broad chest, the kind of sound you'd think would bring birds down from the branches. Rolen hung back, twisting something between his fingers, a weed maybe, or an old button. Ser rolled a tight smile, swallowing the urge to wince. "Not much to tell," he lied. "Took too much from Ward's bottle, tripped over myself, landed my face on a fence post. Right on the sweet spot." He tapped under the bruised eye, feeling the pain spark from the touch. The three older boys cackled. Balu slapped his thigh so hard the sound bounced along the field. "That'd do it? You're your own worst enemy, sir." Lavu grinned, shaking his head, dirt caked under every fingernail. "And here I thought you could take a punch. Guess you beat yourself bloody before anyone else has to." Rolen managed a thin smile, eyes darting between the boys. Laughter faded quick, replaced by the scrape of someone walking up from the road. Ward's boots snapped twigs as he passed. His shadow cut across the boys, casting their grins into sharp lines. Ward didn't stop, only nodded once, eyes hard on Ser, and moved down the road without a word. Silence followed behind him. The laughter shriveled. For a long breath, nobody moved. Viti cleared his throat, foot shuffling dirt. "Ser, quiet now. We were thinking about camping tonight. Get away from here a bit, you know?" His fingers twisted at his belt, eyes averted. Rolen bit his lip, looking at Ser. Ser saw it. The worry burrowed into Roland's brow, the way he hadn't quite looked at his uncle as he passed. Ser sighed out, like air leaking from a tire. "Yeah, might be good to get out for a night." Balu thumped Ser on the shoulder, almost gentle. "You need it worse than any of us. I'll bring bread, real stuff, not last week's leftovers. Promise." Lavu's head bobbed in agreement. "Could be fun," he said. Even without Vera around. Viti's face pinched into a goofy smile. Laughter bubbled up again, weaker this time, but genuine. They drew up plans quick, tossing brags about food and supplies. Rolen perked up, nodding when someone listed firewood or sharp sticks for chasing off whatever wandered close to the campsite. "At sundown," Viti said. "We'll come to your place, sir. If you're not there, we're breaking the door down." He tried a threat, voice cracking into warmth. Ser grinned. "Go for it. Nothing worth stealing in that house." Lavu's grin spread. Viti couldn't even break a chicken egg, let alone a door. Remember when he knocked at Destova Trofin's, thinking she'd let him in for supper? The others howled, Viti's neck blooming pink. Viti shrugged, flexing tiny muscles. "Everyone gets shut out sometimes. Watch, I'm catching that wild fur boar tonight." There pulled himself up, stretching arms overhead, bruised ribs creaking. "Let's get gone before Ward comes back." They filtered toward the village gates, sun catching on the tin plates hammered onto the wooden posts. The trio of older boys peeled off fast, clattering along side streets. Ser and Rolen fell behind, feet dragging in the dirt. No one else walked the street. Houses shuttered, smoke curling thin from chimneys, the stink of burned oatmeal hanging in the air. Party leftovers, Ser guessed. Roland kicked a stone, watching it skitter ahead. "Sorry, sir," he said, voice lower than the wind. "For what?" Ser pressed, clicking his tongue on the roof of his mouth. "Telling Balu. You said not to say, but I... Roland's words stumbled, falling flat. Turked a hand into his pocket, heel gouging the road. "Don't bother with it, Rolen. Needed someone to know." Roland's face twisted up, trying to sort through the mess behind his eyes. "Uncle says I got too much to say for a kid my age. Can't keep secrets. Ser shrugged. Most adults chase their own ghosts. You did what you had to do. They reached the intersection where Roland's house sagged in the clay. Ser stopped, eyeing the crooked fence, the sagging porch boards. Keep looking out for yourself, Roland. Don't rush to be older than you are. A nervous chuckle slipped out of Rolen. Sir, you think I'll do something important? My aunt says all the boys in this village end up fishers or farmers or... He stopped, scuffing his toe. Ser stared a minute, jaw tight. This place chews up most who stay. You keep trying new things, like you do, maybe you end up different. Roland wrung his hands, eyes hunting the street. You think I'll find my magic? Maybe, Ser replied, voice flat. Might live your life without it, but you'll survive. Your toys keep you busy, don't they? He forced a small grin. Roland straightened, spirits rallying like a kicked dog. I'll make something for you soon, something that counts. Ser gave a heavy nod, then shoved him gently toward his rickety door. Roland vanished into the shadow, door thumping behind him. Ser's boots dragged the road back to his corner of Tuitoma. The sun dipped. Windows glowed orange in its last spit of light. His uncle's house squatted at the village edge, smoke piping from the roof, tears of old rain dribbling off warped eaves. As he pushed the door, smells of steak hit salt, char, blood. Ward worked hunched over a pan, sweat coursing down his neck, shirt stained in streaks. For a second, Ward's face held nothing but warmth. Hunger got you, Ward called, voice scratchy. Ser raised a brow, still cautious. Yeah? Sure. Ward snorted. Meat from Siggy Bales. The old man finally paid me for that roof fix, and... He trailed off, sliding a red steak onto a cracked plate and thrusting it at Ser. Ser forked meat without waiting, blood pooling into bread. First bite hit his teeth, juice running down his chin. Neither talked for a long few minutes, Ward scraping his plate with old, yellowed utensils. Ser chewed in the quiet, watching flies circle the lamp, dancing shadows against the table. Halfway through, Ser weighed his words, finally spitting them out, because something needed saying. Why? Why the good mood? Ward considered, old lines at his mouth deepening. Long years. Too much loss, too little light. Your father... He cut himself short, staring at the wall like it might open up to 10 years past. Ter dropped his fork, not breathing. Ward licked his teeth, forced out a hollow laugh. Made mistakes, sir. Most don't leave scars, but some do. You remind me of him, your dad. Integrity, he had it. I've ruined that word for myself. Ser rose, pulled by habit to clear plates and wipe the crumbs from the table. But Ward waved him off. Go meditate or whatever it is you do, Ward grumbled. Clean up here's the least I can do. Ser nodded, stepped to the center rug, legs crossed as the house creaked with Ward's tired footsteps, a single candle swaying with each step. He shut his injured eye, let breath ease. Furniture shifted in the night wind, casting sharp, strange shadows against the mud brick wall. On the rack, the obsidian sword's flat edge winked, a thin line of silver catching the last bit of light. Ser listened as Ward scraped grease from the pan, iron against stoneware, echoes bouncing off the walls. Every sound in the place felt sharper during these moments. Flies buzzing against a window, smudged by years. Ward's slow, cautious footsteps across packed earth, the sizzle of remaining drippings tossed to the ash pit outside. He sat cross-legged, hands limp in his lap, spine pressed stiff and upright, just like Mother had shown him long ago, while she still lived. That memory came without warning, a flash of her hand gently straightening his back, brushing sawdust from his shoulder, cool and real as morning breeze. In the space behind his eyes, the ache pulsed from his swollen left lid, bleeding slow into his jaw. The darkness became a kind of room. Breathing grew easy, every muscle slackened. He pictured that obsidian blade on its rack. The edge drew light in, greedy, refusing to reflect. Next to it lay the scabbard, leather so old the stitching puckered white and rough. Above the grip, the figure of a woman, etched out of thin layers of silver. Her face looked forward, stern. He could see dust along the blade's floor, bits of his own blood from the last time he'd nicked his finger while cleaning it. He reached out, if only in mind. Sometimes, during these sits, a warmth pried open behind his ribs. Sometimes, nothing but cold. Tonight, cold. His breath caught in the back of his throat. The world shrank to the back of his throat. The world shrank to the sound of Uncle scraping ash outside and a distant rooster complaining through the dusk. There were no visions, no celestial voices. His family's stories lied. Nothing waited for you if you sat and waited for it. Only your own mind, the half-formed memories, hungers you couldn't name, questions you got from grown men who drank before breakfast. Still, something always happened after a while. Tonight it was the click of the door, dry push of the wind. Ser cracked one eye open. Ward's boots hung upside down from a hook, dripping something dark onto the mat. The smell of steak already faded, replaced by sweat and the scent of dust. Through the only window, twilight pooled thick and blue at the horizon. He stood, knees popping. On the rack, the sword waited, Silverwolf's face never changing. He touched the pommel, cool under his calloused finger. For a heartbeat, the room felt too small for him. Even at rest, that weapon took up space. A knock came at the door, sharp, not hurried. Ser stuffed his hands into his trouser pockets and pulled the door open with his foot, expecting the boys. They were there. Balu with a string bag of flatbread, Viti balancing a gourd of something that glugged when he leaned, Lavu chewing the end of a dry stick, and Rolen with a length of cord he twisted and untwisted around his fingers, face set and hopeful. Behind them the world turned blue. Bats pecked at mosquitoes, their twisted cries cutting in and out. No one laughed. Tonight, the amusement from before had rusted off. Something about the way Ward had passed them on the road had sobered even the wildest of the group. "Everyone got what they need?" Ser asked, voice pitched low so Ward wouldn't wake if he'd already fallen into his cups. Balu nodded in a short jerk. Lavu lifted a threadbare blanket, holding it out like an offering. Rolen dug into his sack, pulling out 2 sour apples, some jerky, and a small, thick candle glued to the bottom with his own handmade wax. "If it gets too dark," he whispered, as if apologizing. Viti grinned. "Got fire. And I got the good stuff." He pulled the cork on the gourd, sniffed it, and grimaced. "It's not bad. Only a little burn." He set it down again. No one argued. There, closed the door soft behind him, boots finding the same creases they always had in the worn dirt. "We go east," he said. "That way, we're above the river, but not all the way to the cliff. No one will find us if we keep to the bramble line." Lavu straightened. "You leading, or getting lost?" He grinned, but worry flashed through his eyes just the same. He hadn't forgotten what a misstep in these woods meant. Sharp rocks, sinkholes, roots slick with moss, a drop to the water 24 paces below, at places where the ground just said to hell with it and fell away. Sia nodded and started walking. The others followed. Each foot crushed stalks and sent frogs leaping. Insects whined. The torches Viti brought weren't lit yet. They all knew their way at dusk, even half-blind. The world moved neat, under boots, roots and mud telling their own ancient story. No one spoke loud, only the soft grumbling, "Viti, don't spill it," or "Balu, your blanket's dragging mud." Roland's candle banged against his thigh, swinging from a bit of twine strung through his belt. Their path snaked between split boulders, grass taller than Ser's waist, droplets still clinging from afternoon rain. Shadows closed in, blue to black, stars rising only one by one, fighting through the low clouds. They passed an old boundary post, blackened by lichen, the top chunk missing as if some wild animal or hungry villager had taken a bite from the wood. Beyond it, trees packed tighter, roots rising like fingers from shallow graves. At each turn, Sir Ediath weighted his steps, reading the ground, remembering last year when he and Balu tried to pitch a tent near here and the whole thing collapsed on their heads because woodlice had hollowed the floor. Lavu circled wide at every jump of darkness. He had seen a snake here once, and even if he said it didn't haunt his dreams, everyone knew it did. Viti kept behind, his free hand buried in his trouser pocket, shoulder hunched. No one carried weapons, not real ones. Sir once asked Ward for a hunting blade, but was told he'd cut his own balls off before finding his own dinner. He'd learned to cut with stones, fingers, and patience. Now, the boys pooled what they had. Roland's longest whittled stick, Balu's old belt knife, so short it was more nail than handle, and Lavu's father's spoon, filed at the end into something nearly sharp. The land rose under them, grass falling away to stones speckled by moss and cracked bark. At last, Sir stopped, shining good eyes sweeping the sight. The space sat in a bowl of dirt, shielded on three sides by wigs of bramble and swordgrass. The open end pointed west toward the safe, slow spill of the village lights, a line of orange dots at the bottom of the valley. "We make fire here. It's dry," Ser said. "No one else see us." He knelt, scratching earth with his bare hands, palms as rough as bark now. Rolen dropped beside him, the candle clutched in both hands, eyes wide for work, waiting for his place. Lavu and Balu leaned into the brambles, snapping off dead branches, collecting handfuls of kindling. Viti fumbled with the gourd, inching it away from the blanket in case anyone got clumsy. Ser's hands made a pit, nothing elegant, just enough to scrape together a bowl. Rolen set the candle at its edge, and Balu struck flint against Lavu's bent spoon blade, missing as much as lighting, until a trickle of spark caught in the dry bits. Smoke curled, sharp and low. Ser, who had lived every season, with wind finding the smallest draught, cupped the flame with his body, coaxed it until living fire shivered in their circle. Balu tossed thicker wood on. Viti hunched close, eager for warmth, sloshing his drink, then thinking better and pulling away. The fire danced, smoke leaking into clothes, settling deep in lungs. The boys dropped packs and blankets, boots kicked into a pile. They circled around the flames, each one's face drawn orange and shadowed by the leap of light. Roland's cheeks shone under soot, hair wild. Lavu's eyes, without smile, scanned the brambles for movement. Balu and Viti cut hunks off the bread, passing them down. Jerky made hard chewing. The first swig of Viti's gourd came to Ser, who tipped it and let the hot, homebrew stuff strike the back of his tongue, eyes watering at the sting. He passed it to Lavu with a smirk. Lavu barely raised a brow before gulping half. They settled as boys do, making noise so as not to think about why they'd left their own houses, a kind of defense. If you talked and laughed, you didn't have to face the darkness behind. Didn't have to think about Ward's cold stare, or the taste of blood in your mouth from last night's beating. Viti poked at the fire, eyes glinting. "So, sir, what really happened with Ward?" Ser hunched, scraped his boot. "Nothing you haven't seen before. He just had more to drink. Wasn't me he was angry at, just the world. He thinks my face can take the blame." Silence a long moment. Then Lavu cleared his throat. "He ever going to talk about your folks?" Ser's jaw flexed. "Don't care if he does." No one challenged that. Fire snapped. Jerky tore. Frogs sang low in the river. Balu was first to break it after a while, voice rough. "Remember when Roland's uncle tried fishing with cheese? Because he saw it work for city folk. Pulled up a boot, didn't he? Rolen, you still got that boot?" Roland grinned. Shy shook his head. "Mom made me throw it. Said it stunk up the house." He looked at Ser, something behind his lazy smile. Bet I could catch a fish with just a spoon and old bread. You'd end up in the river, Viti laughed. The moon began its rise, a fat, pocked thing, glow-tugging shadows out from the brambles. The fire shrunk, piled low. Their voices trickled into the ground. Stories about school beats. Old Man Sorrel's one-eyed goat. The night Viti tried to steal plums from Magda's window and had to jump 3 fences to escape her boys. Balu handed bread to Ser. "You're quiet," he said, not quite a question. Tachude shrugged. "Tired. Feels like all year's gone and packed itself into my head these last 2 nights." Lavu chucked a piece of kindling into the fire. "At least with school out, we're free men now." He forced bravado. Viti's laugh came too loud, nerves jabbering in his throat. "Free to run from our own farms." No one argued. They shifted, blankets spread awkward, Roland curling in, little legs drawn beneath a thin shirt. Ser watched the others a bit, feeling some weight lighten, not all. His eye throbbed. The fire flickered, shadows raked across the bramble and over fallen boots. A distant howl, only a jackal, but enough to send Lavu glancing sidelong at his belt knife. With nobody moved to sleep yet. The gorge below hummed with water slipping over stone. For just a moment, Ser let the sound pull him away from the taste of blood and fire, let his chest loosen. Trouble would find them again with daylight, but for now, boys sat close in the scrub, 1 scarred, 4 unbroken by the night, and everyone unsure if morning would feel any different. A long silence settled in after the last round of laughter. Only the pop and hiss of burning wood filled the small camp. Ser chewed another tough strip of jerky, letting his jaw do the work while his good eye watched how the shadows crawled up the inside of their makeshift camp. Rolen poked at the dirt with a stick, sending half-burnt bits of grass toward the fire. The others leaned on elbows or stretched bare feet closer to the heat, each blinking slow, quiet and thoughtful, their bodies ringed by a soft sweat under their clothes. Roland, restless, looked up at Ser with the nervousness of a dog that expects to be kicked. "What do you think's out there?" he asked, voice trembling but wanting a real answer. "Past the hills. Past, you know, everything." Lavu gave out a slow grunt, not mocking. "More dirt, more trees, more keepers, maybe." These spat a seed into the flames. "Desert, I heard. City people talk about sand, hot enough to burn shoes through. Some folks never seen the river freeze, never seen rain for a whole summer." Balu pulled the blanket higher over his knees. "All stories. Nobody real's ever been anywhere but here. If they say they have, they're either old or talking shit." Sia's mind poked at the idea, his chest hollow for a second. "The minstrels, though. They travel. They've seen mountains, cities, all of that. There's a place, Rugol, northwest, where the king rides a goat to chapel," Viti cut in, getting a grumble from Lavu. Ser glanced up and finished. "Said there's more water than 1,000 Kama rivers, and you can see fish jumping up high waterfalls, and nights where the stars fall and the sky is so clear the cold kills your fire if you look at it too long." The boys nodded, as if this confirmed something they'd already known but needed someone to say. It was easy to believe in distant wonders where nobody had ever risked their necks or pride. Roland set his stick down, rubbing his palms together. He watched the embers, face drawn tight, lip twitching with the question he wanted to ask. It hung there until it fell out. "You think it's better? Somewhere like that?" Nobody had an answer right away. In the quiet, frogs and insects pressed in, louder than the night before. Balu stirred, the threadbare blanket sliding off his shoulder. He snorted. "Better's what folks say, because it isn't here. Anywhere you sleep'll have bugs and bad stew, and someone who's meaner than you. Here, you know which bastard's going to steal your boots." Lavu nodded agreement. "At least here, ward only gets you once in a while, eh, sir?" Ter clenched his jaw, but didn't dispute it. The air between them slipped thin. Viti leaned in, breaking the tension. "Would you leave? If you could?" he asked Ser. Ser flicked a bit of bone into the grass. "If anyone had me, maybe. If not, maybe I'd just keep walking until my boots split." Rolen sat quiet for a moment, then asked, "What about the keepers? What if you run into one of them?" That shivered everyone's nerves a little. Even Balu, whose bravado never cracked for long, shifted in his seat. Nobody liked talking about the keepers, but sometimes a thing needed to be named before it could be put away. "Most folks never see one," Lavu muttered. "Some don't even believe they're real. They just say it so kids don't talk back. Uncle says they're real. Says that if you see one and live to talk about it, you never sleep right again. Old folks say a lot, though," Viti added. "Ward says plenty once he's got a bit in him. He says you—" He stopped, eyes darting to Ser's ruined brow. "Never mind." "But," Ser pressed it. "Go on." Viti hesitated, but said it. "He says you belong to the keepers, that they marked you, even before you knew how to hold a hoe. I always thought it was just him. You know, talking. Didn't mean nothing by it." Ser didn't answer. He watched the flames leap higher, wood crack and shift. His chest burned in a prickly way, a hunger mixed with something like shame and something else, a muddy, hard-to-name rage. It felt old as any memory he kept of Ward. Lavu, growing anxious, changed topic. "Remember when Belz's old mule ate half the harvest and ran off? They had to chase it 2 valleys down. That mule had more sense than all the old men in Tuitoma combined." He snickered, his relief obvious. Balu laughed. "Siggy was so pissed, told everyone no one gets meat that whole week. Still had blood on his apron, though. Guess he found it by morning." They let the story ride out. The mood lifted in hesitant fits, the boys finding comfort in familiar jokes and memories, letting the dark press in a little less. When the food finally dwindled to bits and the drink ran low, Ser took the first turn, gathering more wood from the edges while the last sighs of orange flickered in the pit. The cold sneaked up, thick enough to sting through only a shirt and thin trousers. Rolen followed him with the stub of his precious candle, lighting the way. The two moved close together, not talking, just worked, breaking fallen limbs, dragging them through bramble. Sticks snapped, sending beetles scurrying. Above, a nightjar, corked once, long and lonesome. Some lights still flickered near the village. Most were out. "Think Ward will look for you?" Rolen asked quietly, staring down at his own shoes. Ser shook his head. "He's got his bottle. He's done for the night. Won't wake until I come home." Rolen took this without comment, eyes round and careful. "He ever tell you about your ma?" Ser hesitated. "Bits. Only when he's angry, and he's always angry." "Sorry," Rolen said, pushing a branch into the crook of his arm. Ser shrugged, shifting his weight. "You didn't make him. He makes himself." They came back to the fire with their arms full, dumped sticks and splinters, piling up enough to last the night. The others murmured thanks, their voices sleepy. Lavu stared up, eyes half-lidded. "I'll take first watch," he lied, pulling his blanket over his chest. Ser threw another stick on the fire. He'd never slept right outdoors, his ears too sharp, his body used to waking at any tremor or scrape. Tonight, he let himself feel the weight of friendship, for what it was, a kind of shield, thin as it might be, still warming. A little time passed before conversation started back up, quieter, more drifting as the boys settled into drowsy piles, feet and elbows and heads nestled against each other in their rough pattern of trust. Viti, eyes glassy from drink, asked, "You ever want to go looking for your magic, sir? I mean, go where the keepers walk, out past the world." Ser studied the embers, heat licking his palms. "Magic or not, it wouldn't change Ward, would it? Wouldn't bring back my old man, my ma." The words came blunt, steady. "I guess not," Rolen replied. He kept his gaze down, fingers tight around his knees. Another silence grew, broken only by the popping fire and the quiet nighttime things that lived always outside the edge of camp, hushed, animal, shifting. Some time later, clouds drifted over the moon, dimming everything to shapes and sounds. Ser lay back, arms folded behind his head, staring up, tracing patterns in the part of the sky not covered. He counted the brightest stars he could see, remembering what his mother had called each one. The names came watery, but they came, and for a while no one moved except to shift for warmth, breaths evening into sleep. The cold did not leave. Wind picked up, fluttering the edge of Roland's blanket where he had dozed off. Ser rolled over, pulling the chafed wool higher over the boy's skinny shoulder, then lay for a long while, listening to the world outside himself, the breathing of friends, the soft, uncertain hush of river water tumbling in the darkness below, the taste of old pain still pounding under his eye, the pulse of something restless always inside him, trying to press forward, trying to explain itself, waiting for morning to come. The boys drifted to restless sleep, one by one. Viti went first, chin sinking to his chest. After a while, his snoring started, rasping and wet, uneven as broken saw teeth. Balu sprawled out flat on his back, arms folded above his stomach, eyes half shut, but not quite trusting sleep to take him all the way. Too used to his father waking him with a boot in the ribs when chores went unfinished. Lavu twisted against the roots at his back, trying to get comfortable, cursing under his breath, then pulling the blanket higher to cover his head. Ser lay on his side, breathing slow, hands curled under his jaw for warmth. The fire's glow moved over his face. Now and then the flames cracked, sending sparks up to fade before they hit the overhang of vine and branch. Frogs churned their throats from down by the river, the big ones with bellies like wine jugs. Moths circled near the fire, sometimes finding the heat and falling in without a sound. Behind him, Rolen shivered, but didn't complain. Ser felt him inch closer, the edge of a bony knee bumping against his back. In the city, boys their age would have separate beds, even separate rooms if the family was mean or rich. Here, warmth was worth more than pride, so nobody made much of it, least of all Ser. If Rolen had dreams, he didn't speak them. He breathed shallow and quick, waking every hour to adjust the blanket, fussing without fully leaving sleep. Each time Ser's eyes shut, the pain in his bruised socket flared, sharp, then dull, then sharp again, until the rhythm felt almost comforting, a tether to the moment. Lying there, he counted out breaths, matching each one to the names of friends and his own small wishes. Chores done. A dry day tomorrow. Ward to sleep through until the sun was high. That was all he allowed himself. Somewhere behind his thoughts, the keeper's stories crept in. Old ones, handed down from the grandmothers around smoky kitchen tables. The keepers were said to walk at night, never showing themselves but always watching from the corners where the lamps flickered out. Crossing the village fields, that's where you'd see a shadow that wasn't quite a man, not quite a beast. Just a black twist where nothing should move. Every village had a tale about a girl called out into tall grass, a woman losing her voice and never returning it, a father running mad when he chased the shape that carried off his youngest son. Nothing specific, no proof, just the dread that lived wherever the woods grew too thick for eyes to follow. They rolled over, watching the coals. They pulsed and glowed, changing shape every few seconds. Glaring eyes, snarling mouths, the face of his mother, wrecked and lost. He shook it off, spit into the fire, and closed his eye again. At some point, he slipped into a half-dream where Ward stood over him, voice thick and distant. "You're a Sarrafin, whether you want it or not. The name's already a scar on your back. Don't make it worse." In the dream, Ser tried to stand, but the ground spun under him and the roots came up to grab his ankles, holding him in place. His mother's hand reached out, not to help, but to press him down harder, words he couldn't quite make out spilling through her teeth. her eyes empty and shining. He startled awake, heart hammering, sweat cold on his brow. The fire burned low. Grey daylight wormed its way across the eastern edge of sky. It wasn't full morning, but birds had started up, raspy chirps, and the slow, sad, low call of the river heron. Rolen sat up, knees hugged to his chest, eyes wide and dark. "You dream?" Ser asked. Rolen nodded, but didn't explain. The fire spat when Ser kicked in another stick. He pulled the last chunk of bread from Viti's pack, gnawed off a bit, passed it to Rolen, who took it in both hands as if it might vanish. Lavu stirred, muttered something about freezing to death, then sat up, rubbing at his eyes. "We make it through the night?" he asked, not quite awake. Viti groaned into his fist. "Sun's not up. Call me when there's food, or at least heat." Balu was already awake, pretending sleep. He rolled up, stretching his back until it popped. "If we hurry, we can fish the river before anyone else gets there." Ser didn't argue. He rolled up the blanket, shook out the grit, and stuffed it into his sack. "Pack up. If we leave now, none of the old folk will see us dragging home." Rolen did what he was told, eyes shiny but dry. He tucked away his candle, blew on his hands. No fancy words, no talk of what the night had meant or where they'd go once they reached the village edge. They doused the coals with the last slosh of river water. The fire hissed and spit out twin plumes of smoke. Ser kicked dirt over the heap, feeling the warmth run out from under his boot. The walk back felt colder. Hunger bit at bellies that hadn't been full to begin with. None of the boys spoke much. Their jokes run down to nothing. Damp clung to the grass, making feet slip and toes burn in their boots. Every step closer to the village was another reminder of ward, of chores undone, of the little world that would be waiting, and the big one that never seemed to appear, no matter how far out you went. Ser noticed Rolen touching the swollen skin around his eye, as if checking to see if it might have gotten better without anyone noticing. "It'll go down," Ser said, voice low, not for comfort, just truth. "Glass of water, more rest." Rolen looked at Ser straight for the first time since last night, nodded. He had blood at the corner of his mouth, picked up in sleep from biting down too hard. He wiped it away with a dirty thumb. By the time they made the road, the sun broke free of the clouds, a sharp red gash pulling light over rooftops and through the crooked fence planks that hemmed each yard. Chickens scratched at the frost. A fox darted between rubbish heaps, dragging something grey and limp. The boys moved quick under the new light, clothes filthy but heads up, as if the night hadn't touched them, hadn't changed a thing. At Ser's gate, the group stuttered to a stop. Viti broke the silence, voice gruff with cold. "Same time next week, or you too busy fighting fence posts?" He grinned, toothless side shining. Ser managed half a smile, more habit than humour. "We'll see," he said. "Depends whose dad wants the field worked." Balu clapped him on the shoulder. Hard this time, a real slap, but without meanness. Lavu offered a quick two-finger salute, already eyeing the road toward his own house. Rolen lingered. The others peeled off, voices dying behind hedges and half-built walls. They shuffled in circles, boot grinding dirt. "You want me to stop by later? I made something for you. Keeps birds off the beans. Maybe it works." Ser nodded, feeling the weight between them. Something real that wouldn't change much even if 100 nights like last night passed. "I'll look for you after chores." Rolen gave a sharp nod, eyes wary but hopeful, then hustled down the lane toward his house, candle bobbing in his pocket. Ser stood a moment at the gate, collecting himself. The bruised eye throbbed, his jaw grit. Morning climbed the back wall, lighting the kitchen window, where Ward's shadow moved behind greasy glass. The old man was up, pounding around heavy as ever, scent of boiled onions already strong, even from the yard. Ser pushed the door wide, the warped boards complaining. He stepped in. Ward sat at the table, chin in hand, staring at something invisible in the corner. His fist rested on the wood, not in anger, just there, flat and unmoving. Ser went straight for the water jug, pouring himself a cup, letting it sit on the table between them. Ward's head jerked up. He eyed Ser's face, then the cup, then stared back at his own hand. "Did you see the stars last night?" Ward asked, not looking up. Ser sipped. The water was flat, no taste but dirt and the memory of last month's drought. "Some," he said. Ward grunted. He kept his head low. The silence between them stretched, the kind that made Ser want to turn heel and walk back outside. Instead, he sat. If Ward planned on another round of questions or old man wisdom, let him. For now, Ser felt every mark on his body, the bruise below his eye, the thin scratch across his forearm from brambles, the bite of hunger in his gut, the ache of too little sleep. He set his cup down, forearms on the table, knuckles white and raw. Ward's eyes traced the scars and failed crop lines across Ser's hands, then moved up to meet his gaze, not his injured eye, but the other. "You're not your father," he said, voice cold, cracked, but honest. "You know that?" Ser nodded once. The thing in his chest turned over, sharp as a nail pulled from wood. The room spun with dust motes, fat and slow. Ward snorted, some sound caught between a cough and a laugh. "But you're not so far off. I see him some days. See your ma, too, when you aren't scowling." He kept his voice even, never once softening. "Go get the fields started. Don't want the whole day wasted. Breakfast is what's left in the pot." Ser rose. He made for the door, hesitated, then looked back at Ward, seeing for a breath the old man as tired and spent as anyone could be, seldom honest, never gentle. For a second, neither spoke. Ward nodded, curt and slow, eyes on the empty spot at the other side of the table. Ser slipped out, pulling the door tight, breath fogging in the new light. The world outside had not changed. Dirt clung to his boots, the fields bristled with weeds, and the work waited in rows, as crooked and messy as yesterday. He picked up the hoe, the handle still warm from the last touch, and carried it to where he'd left off. The bruises ached. He eased himself into the rhythm of the day, row after row, sweat stinging, jaw set. The sounds of the world closed in. Chickens calling, a stray dog yapping, Roland's laughter rolling from a window somewhere up the road, the distant crack of stones against the wheel as the cart bounced toward market. Everything returned to what it was, only a thin line marked where the fire had burned their campsite into the dirt, and the night had stitched itself into the boys that walked its edges. There gripped the hoe, shoulders hunched to block the sun, and started in on the first row, the ground biting hard underfoot, stubborn as ever. Ser pressed the blade into rough earth, boots spread for balance, arms steady from habit more than strength. He drove the hoe again and again, the soil breaking in fat clods, root webs catching and tearing with each pass. His body remembered the motion, bending into labor before his mind woke all the way. The pain along his jaw faded into the churned-up stink of old leaf rot and manure. Morning light crept across the rows, drawing the buzz of beetles and flies woken by fresh sweat. A crow scattered off a fence post, cutting a crooked path across his good eye's field of vision. The fields stretched both ways, untidy, stubborn. No matter how much work he put in, they never looked as clean as the ones closest to Market Road, where rich Chihol cousins grew peas sweet as sugar and paid hands to weed by hand. Ser's lines wandered left and right, the work never good enough to win him more than a grunt from Ward. A dry patch near the edge drew him off course, and he jammed the hoe into hard clay. Sweat slipped down his neck and back, shirt clinging. He stopped to scratch at the welt where the seam caught his side. His swollen eye stung every time the wind caught it wrong. He worked anyway. He didn't notice Rolen until a bright whistle came from the ditch. The younger boy picked his way across clumps of stone, hair wild from the night before, a sack slung over one shoulder. "Ward said you'd be here," Rolen called, swinging the sack with both hands for show. Ser pushed a clod of dirt with his boot, nodded to Roland. "I'm always here." Roden reached him and crouched to open the bag. He dug out his invention, a tangle of bent wires, feathers, a battered tin plate, and bits of bone fastened together with twine and so. "Scares off blackbirds," Rolen announced, pushing it at Ser. "You wire it to a post. The wind'll spin the bones and feathers." He gave it a flick. The plate rattled, feathers spun, bone clicked against tin. Ser watched the thing, lips twitching up. How many crows did it scare? Roland shrugged, not offended. "Few, maybe. They're smarter than cows. Takes them a while to realize it's just noise." "Thought you could use it on the beans. Keeps them off long enough for a harvest." Ser took it, turned it over in his rough hands, feeling the bones and tin. He jabbed it into a fence post, pressed it in deep, and stepped back. The wind picked up, spinning the feathers. The noise startled another crow, which whistled away. "Might work," Ser said. They stood for a while, side by side, watching the crows sort themselves along the wire fence, calling sharp and hungry. Ser went back to the row. Rolen followed, looking for stones to skip at the edge of the irrigation ditch. He kicked up a fat toad and watched it lumber for wet earth. Work pulled Ser's mind empty. Each swing, each stab of the hoe, each turn of his neck dodging flies blurred brain and body into one thing. After an hour, he barely heard Ward's call from the lane. Ward's figure moved toward them, slower than usual, favoring his right leg. He carried a bucket, beaten and stained, and set it at Ser's feet without a word. Rolen looked at them both, sensing weight thickening in the moment. Ward squinted at the invention stuck to the post. "Ugly as hell," he muttered, "but if it works, keep it." He bent, picked up a clod of dirt, crumbled it between fingertips. Earth fell through his hands, slow, as if looking for something good in it. Ser turned to set the next row. Ward didn't leave. Finally he grunted, motioned at a patch where weeds grew high. "You missed this." Ser nodded, didn't argue. Ward didn't look angry, just tired, mouth pulled thin, eyes gone grey. Ward glanced at Rolen. "Did your uncle know you were out last night, boy?" Rolen shook his head, foot grinding a stone into the mud. "He's at market today. Won't know unless someone says." Ward snorted, half approving, half not. "Keep it that way." He looked back at Ser, as if deciding on something. "You eat?" Ser wiped his brow. "I will." Ward lingered. The three stood silent, daylight crawling over their shoes. Ward cleared his throat, offered no more, and strode back toward the house. Rolen watched him disappear, face hard to read. "Think he's gotten nicer?" he asked. Ser shrugged, squinting against the sun. "He's gotten old." They finished the field's edge. The crows steered wide around Roland's invention. Wind caught the bones again, setting feathers spinning, plates tinkling, a faint music not quite right for joy or sorrow. Rolen fetched water, dipping from the little tributary, then climbed onto the fence, legs swinging over weed and furrow. Ser watched him, envy flickering low and quick. Rolen lived with his uncle too, but nobody hit him, and nobody made him eat standing up. That was a small kind of luck. He would take it if he could. "Want to try fishing after chores?" Rolen called. Sudden, hopeful. Ser looked at muddy rows. Ward would want potatoes dug or the chicken coop fixed. But Roland's face waited, eyes wide, already thinking about the river and a quiet spot away from the road. "Maybe," Ser said, "if Ward lets up." "I'll wait by the big stone," Rolen promised, already jumping down, running off before Ser could take the words back. The day passed like workdays always did. Sweat, dirt, blood under a fingernail from a stubbed thumb, the crows darting and bitching on the far line of fence, but the beans safe for now, the rows half straight, half cooked. No one came to bother him. Ward shouted once or twice from the house, but didn't cross the yard again. Other farmers passed now and then, nodding or scowling, never stopping long. At noon, Ser took a piece of old bread with an onion, ate, sitting on a stone, the sun overhead so hot it made the sweat dry white streaks on his arms. His mind drifted. He wondered if Vera had heard about his face, if she would care, if she'd laugh, tell her brothers, add another insult to the pile he carried. He didn't care, as much as he thought he would. He wondered about tomes, the old stories of boys his age, heroes, or at least ones with better luck, banding together for purpose. Navera kept tomes in its songs and tales, but none of those stories matched what boys here were or did. Still, Ser let himself imagine walking out past the river, carrying the sword with the silver woman, and finding some purpose waiting in the hills. Stupid, but better than counting potatoes. Afternoon crawled on. Ward's shadow stretched across the yard, then the sun dipped below the roofline, dragging red along the windows. Work done, Ser dumped the hoe by the door. He wiped grime from under his nails, scrubbed his face with the water by the door, spat out dirt. The bruise on his eye still glared, but no longer boiled. He thought about Roland, waiting on the big stone near the river. He thought about nothing at all, for a moment, letting the quiet sink into his bones. Ser looked back at the house, Ward in the window, pipe held between dry lips, watching but not saying a word. Ser set off toward the river, not hurrying, boots squelching in red mud, each step lighter the further he got from home. He followed the dirt track along the edge of the field, boots sticking in clay that sucked at each step. At the fence, he gripped the post, swung himself over, and crossed the brush that the village let go wild each year. Midges rose in dense clouds, their buzzing thick. He ducked his head, waved one hand in front of his face, and picked up his pace. The air changed, damper, cooler, carrying the sour river smell. He reached the water where the current bent around an old split boulder. There was reed grass and wisteria tangled along the bank, roots reaching down where they touched the slow run of the Kama. Rolen sat waiting, legs crossed, a battered can perched next to him, lines already tied with his clumsy knots. His eyes caught Ser's as he neared, hopeful and nervous, already bright from just the promise of company. "Found worms," Rolen said, holding out a tin cupped in both hands. When he lifted the lid, 3 fat, blind things twisted in cold soil. They were under the trough. Ser took one, baited his line. The hook pricked the pad of his thumb. He sucked at it without complaint. The 2 boys stood in silence for a bit, casting lines into muddy current, letting the worms sink behind slow-moving foam. Roland watched the colors change in the water. "What yell when you finished?" Ser shook his head. "Not really. Just pointed at what needed doing. Didn't say much." "My uncle's the same," Roland replied, voice small. He flicked his line, swinging the bait to a deeper eddy. "Thinks if he talks less, he's working harder." Ser waited for a bite. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's all they know. A heron moved downriver, head bobbing, legs too thin to make sense above the mud. The sky widened out, blue piling into thick afternoon gold. Sound traveled better here, the slap and trickle of water, birds arguing in the reeds, a dull hum of someone's hammer far up the bank. They fished without much luck. Sometimes a line jerked, but nothing came up except weeds caught against the hook. Rolen didn't mind. He watched his float drift, bump into Ser's, and drift apart again. Their hands brushed when they reached down for more worm. It was just them, alone beside the river. Ser glanced over, saw the feather and bone contraption tied to the handle of Roland's pack. It spun in the little wind, rattling. "Ward called it ugly," he said. Roland smiled, thin but real. "Works, though. Not everything pretty works, and not everything that works is pretty." They let the lines sit, eyes half-lidded against the light. Roland's stomach growled. Ser heard it, and fished a half-cob of bread from his pocket, handed it over. They shared it in slow chews, flicking crumbs to the ants that worked under their boots. After a long while, Rolen started. "You think you'll ever leave?" Ser didn't answer at first. He watched his float circle in lazy spirals, no sign of fish. He wanted to say he'd thought of leaving every day, but the words wouldn't come. They never did. "Maybe," he finally said. "If I do, I'll send a letter. From somewhere better. Or worse." Rolen nodded, as if he'd figured it out long ago. He watched his own hands, dirt caked deep under each nail. "I'd go, if you did." "Not much to go with," Ser said. "No gold, no map, just bruises. Still more than most." They fell quiet again. A cloud drifted over the sun. The world dulled, everything going grey and soft for a moment. Rolen pulled his line back, checking it, a bent hook, a slick of plant muck. He set it aside, picked up a smooth stone, and skipped it across the surface, 3 jumps before it sank. "You ever see magic?" he asked, low, as if someone might overhear across all that empty field. "Not real magic," Ser said, rolling the thought around, unwilling to lie. "Old Atzbaxi fixes cuts with his medicine, and the minstrels do tricks. But real magic? Not here. Not for our sort. My aunt swears she saw a fire start itself once, behind the church." Ser shrugged. Maybe she did. Rolen looked at him, eyes sharp. "Do you want it, magic?" Ser thought on this, feeling each breath fill his chest, each movement scratch his healing brow. "Wouldn't say no. Could make something of myself. Men don't beat boys who can burn a man's house with a word." Roland nodded. "I'm trying to build something that works, doesn't need spells." A breeze stirred the grass. Their lines swung wide. Sunlight came back and glared off the water. It was bright enough to turn their shadowed faces white, eyes gone narrow and hard against the shine. Ser stood, brushed his hands on his trousers. "We should go," he said. "Wardle off sooner or later." The worms went back in the tin. The lines wrapped slow around rough sticks, tangled sometimes. They walked the river's edge together, feet leaving heavy marks in soft earth, silence so complete that even the birds kept their distance. Around them the world moved on, slow, uncaring, just another working day, another patch of sun and water. At the break in the trees, Roland stopped and looked back at the river. "You ever wish you were someone else?" he asked, not looking at Ser. "Sometimes," Ser admitted. "Rarely changes anything." Roland smiled and started toward the village, the way kids do when they think there's something good waiting, but no, there isn't. Air fell in beside him, and together they crossed back into the line of muddy yards, the drawn faces of hungry neighbors watching from doorways, the smoke of dinner fires already climbing the sky. There wasn't much to say after that. They nodded a quiet goodbye and split off down different tracks, Rolen toward the noise of his uncle's house, Ser back to the empty lane where Ward's shadow crept across the floor. The day dulled to a close, aching and quiet, full of work and absence, the kind of evening that comes and goes 1,000 times before anything ever changes. So washed his hands in the bucket, let the water turn clouded with dirt, and sat at the kitchen table. Ward hadn't set a place, but the old man grunted from his chair. The lamps threw up brittle shapes along the plaster walls, stretching everything thin. "Good field work," Ward said, eyes refusing to meet his. He found stew left in the pot, cold but filling. He ate without complaint, letting each spoonful anchor him to the day. Ward poured himself a drink, staring over the rim, lost in habits that neither asked to be broken nor understood. Ser finished, scraped his bowl, and watched Ward for a sign. Of approval, anger, anything. He expected nothing. He got nothing. He stood, pushed in his chair, and stepped out again, the air colder now, sky purpling above the thatch. The night came down hard, stars flickering between whips of high cloud. Ser lingered at the stoop and looked out on the fens, the scarecrow Rolen built shuddering in the gusts, bones and feathers flashing slow and promising nothing. The world waited, unchanged, unmoved by his wanting, and he let himself wish for something small as silence, just the wind and cold dirt and the shape of another day. He stayed until the cold forced him in, then let the door shut out the dark. The house cooled fast once the sun dropped. Ser closed the shutters over the windows, fitting the warped wood tight to keep the draught out. The hinges whined. The only light left came from the fire in the stove, orange burning down to ash. Ward moved heavy in the other room, muttering as he settled, boots thumping the wall, his sign to be left alone. Ser gathered the chipped plates and took them to the corner, rinsing each in the bucket. Bits of onion skin and limp carrot floated in the grey water. He poured it out under the back step, careful to keep his shoes clean. The chickens would pick at the scraps come daylight if the fox hadn't got to them first. Inside, Ward started snoring in his chair, loud, ragged, deep enough it rattled the windows. Ser watched him a moment, looking for sign of a waking fit. Sometimes Ward woke angry, lost somewhere else, started shouting about things Ser never saw or understood. Tonight he slipped deeper, head lolling, arms folded across his chest. Empty glass on the table. No danger here, unless morning brought something new. Ser swept the hearth, dragging the old broom in slow arcs, pushing the ash toward the pitted clay. He liked the quiet work, the effort of it, the feeling of making some part of the house better. Not much, but enough for an evening with no one yelling. The wind whistled through the thin spots in the wall. He stuffed rags there, packed stone behind them, let the warmth stretch a minute longer. Fire gone low, Ser unrolled his pallet on the hard patch by the stove. The heat here lasted longest. He stripped to his shirt, folded his boots under his head. Even after he lay down, the scrape of straw pricked at the sore places on his back, the clean lines traced by years of broken sleep. He pulled his blanket close, breathed in the last smell of baked bread and lingering sweat, and let the dark come down. The night broke twice. Once to the sound of village dogs boiling up, fighting over something in the road, their howls swinging wild, rattling old glass and setting every bird into shrieking fits for 5 minutes straight. Ward never woke. Ser watched the shutter seams light up with passing lanterns, patrols coming and going, men's feet crunching grit and mud until the pack moved on. The second time, it was hunger that woke him, stomach twisting, mouth gone dry. He lay a while, listening to his own heart, then pulled his boots back on and padded to the larder. There, not much, hunks of old cheese rubbed in salt to keep mold at bay. A bit of smoked fat, backfurred with white, 4 grain onions and a bag of dried beans. He peeled a slice of cheese, chewed it slow, waiting for the craving to fade. He stood a long while at the small window above the sink, watching the sky through the cracks in the wall. Night pressed at the panes. Nothing moved out there but the wind and the glimpse of a cat sliding thin over the rooftops. The stirring hung in him long after he crawled back under his blanket. He drifted, caught on the edge between one day and the next, memories flickering out of order. His father's face, his mother's last cough, Ward's hand smacking his shoulder, Roland's odd smile in the cold and grey under the willows. When he woke for good, the air had changed, thick with the coming of rain. The wind had shifted east and pressed the smoke down over the houses, turning the yard to grey, the fence sagging under the weight of it. Ward already stood over the fire, heating thick porridge in the iron pot. His eyes had the brittle shine of someone who hadn't slept, or had slept hard and angry. "Eat quick," Ward grunted. He scowled out the window, twisting his jaw. Clouds moving up. Gonna rain long and mean. Get the barrels set under the eaves when you're done. Ser nodded and put a spoon to the porridge. It was hot and bland, his favorite thing. Better than nothing. Better than the taste of rust and old grease. He ate all of it, scraped the bowl, swallowed the last dregs of salt. Ward poured him thick tea, brown, bitter, poured his own, and went to the other side of the room. They ate without talking, listening to the drip and tick of water leaking in at the lean-to roof. Ser scraped his bowl clean, washed it in the bucket with a splash, pulled on his coat and boots. Outside, the sky bruised up, heavy and close. He moved the rain barrels against the back wall, lining them under the drip line just as Ward had taught him. Each one settled with the promise of catching enough to wash, to cook, to keep the house flexible if the river ran muddy or the village wells soured in a dry spell. It mattered, every bit. The pigs squealed for feeding, their slop bucket long empty. Ser fetched weeds and peelings, spread the mess in the trough, watched them battle for it, shoulder to shoulder, teeth snapping loud enough for him to hear over the wind. Past the barn, the fields glistened under a low fog. Crows picked the new beans, staying clear of the bone and tin scare. Far off, someone else's dog yapped at nothing, warning nothing, just staking space. He slogged out farther, crossed through a patch of grass lined with dew. Mud pulled at his heels, but he kept moving, head down. Rolen stood at the far end, balanced on the broken fence rail, arms out for balance, hair blown wild, no coat. "Thought you weren't coming," Rolen called. Ser climbed the fence, dropped on the far side and watched as Rolen jumped down beside him. "I'm never late," Ser said. Rolen grinned, teeth chattering, arms tucked under his ribs. "Want to see the trap I set?" he asked. Ser nodded. He followed Rolen through brush and slick grass until they reached a patch below the first big willow by the river. There, tied to a crooked stick, a length of twine snaked through mud, looped tight and tied to a forked branch. The end of the line vanished under water. "Anything there?" Ser asked. Rolen shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe rats chewed the bait." He took the line, braced his feet and pulled slow. Resistance, then the line jerked, caught, went slack. Ser knelt beside him, watching the water swirl eddies where the bait pulled up mud. Together they worked the trap. It spat up nothing this time, no fish, no water rat, not even weeds. Just old silt and bits of broken shell. Rolen wrapped the line up. Not disappointed. "Better tomorrow," he said. "Always is," Ser replied. The rain started as a shiver of wind. Then fat drops angled off the river, smacking through the scrub and stinging their faces. The boys ran for the willows, huddled under the leaning trunk, watching water pelt the grass flat. Everywhere, the world rang with water, their boots soaked through at the seams, feet wrinkled, already sore. "Still," Rolen grinned, showing every tooth. "You think we can build a raft this year?" he asked, kicking a soggy branch at the riverbank. "If we do, Ward won't let me near it," Ser said. "Not unless I promise to clean the house end to end through planting season." "We could build it behind the barn," Rolen said dreamily. "Float it out at night, take it all the way to Sailor Bridge." Ser smiled at the thought. He leaned back against cool bark, listening to the rain pounding down, filling every rut and low ground, and carrying the smell of mud thick as stew. He didn't know if it could be done, or if Ward would let him out of chores long enough to have a hand in it. But in that moment, with the river rising and the willow shaking in the wind, he didn't care. There, the world faded to the sound of water and far-off thunder. The space between storms, and what might come next, stretching open wide enough to let them breathe. The rain settled in, steady as drumming fingers. The river took on a slick sheen, water rising in fits. Ser dug his hands in the mud, idly tracing lines beneath the willow's cover. Rolen squatted beside him, kicking pebbles towards the roots, letting water wick up his trousers. Neither minded the wet anymore, their backs pressed to the thickest part of the trunk, watching wind slap the river's surface. A sharp sound cracked from upriver, wood splitting, maybe a cart's axle or a branch giving out underweight. Ser stiffened, hand hovering over his knee. He exchanged a glance with Rolen. Out here, you paid attention to what snapped. Rolen shifted. Probably old Thomas's boat. His voice was hopeful but unsure. Ser listened close, head canted. Rain changed the world's voices. If it was Thomas, the boat would drift past soon, maybe leaking, maybe not. If it was something else, livestock loose, a tree down, the village would want to know. Ser stood, mud sucking his boots. I'll look, you stay if you want. Rolen hesitated, hunkered lower under the scrubby branches, but he followed anyway, curious, unwilling to be left behind. They followed the tree line upriver, sliding through slick grass, letting rain soak their hair to the scalp. Thorns caught sleeves, shoes stuck and pulled free with wet pops. The sound came again, sharper, closer, then a curse in a man's voice bounced off the water. Sareth dropped into a crouch, reflex drilled by years of hiding from Ward, from older boys, from trouble that was never his but always found him. Roland mirrored him, small hands smearing mud down his shins. Through the break in the willows, they spotted the source. Not Tomas, but a stranger, tall, with a coat bunched high on his shoulders, pushing a cartwheel from the water's edge. The man's ribs showed through his shirt when the wind lashed it close. He fought the wheel, dragging it by rope tied haphazard to its hub. Grey hair plastered his skull. Ser watched, silent. Out here, strangers could mean stories, danger, or nothing at all. Travelers passed sometimes, usually headed to the lumber camps east, or the old crossing at Selah Bridge, but most kept clear of the fields. This one looked beaten by weather and hunger. The man yanked the wheel free, nearly falling backward into the mud. He cursed again, stopped to breathe, then caught sight of the boys. Both froze, ready to bolt. Either help or piss off, the man barked. Ser didn't move, kept his weight grounded. Roland's hand closed around Ser's arm. The stranger watched them, wary, sizing them up as much as they did him. Finally, Ser stepped forward. Where you headed? The man spat, wiped a hand across his face. Where you think? Tuitoma? The gods know you don't have a real bridge, so I'm crossing here. He glared at the wheel. Wasn't told the crossing was this bad. Rain came harder, rattling leaves overhead. The cart lay out of sight behind the willows. The road these days ran to mud once you left the village centre. Ser kept his eyes on the stranger, making a slow judgment. The man's hands shook, not from cold, but lack of food, maybe age. Ser pointed. Parts worse, up by Market Road. Best cross near the stones, where roots grip the bank. The man scoffed, but nodded. You show me, I'll owe you. Ser nodded to Rolen. They led the way through the lowest ground, detouring as much for safety as to keep the stranger in sight. Ser never put his back to him. Rolen stuck so close his elbow knocked Ser's when a root tripped them. They moved out from the thicket, wound through brush, boots squishing in deep puddles. Once at the thick stones, the stranger maneuvered the broken wheel behind, grunting as he hauled the rest of the cart through, rain making everything slick. With both boys pushing at the lower rim, the worst of the mud passed quick. On the far bank, the man fished something from his pocket. A lump of salt pork wrapped in linen, broke it in half, and handed one to Ser. Payment's payment, the man grunted. Better luck here than out there. He stared at Ser's face for 3 long seconds. Ser felt that gaze crawl across his bruised eye and rest on the old scar under his chin. The man shrugged and gathered his belongings, water streaming from his sleeves, then started down the rutted cart path into the heart of the village. Roland sniffed the pork, looked at Ser. You gonna eat that? Ser took a bite, chewed, handed the rest to Roland. Salt stung his cracked lips, but the fat, softened hunger that had built since morning. Rain spit harder. "Come on," Ser said. "Can't get wetter." They trudged back through the brush, wind pushing at their backs, faces cold and stiff. The encounter stuck in Ser's mind. Travelers usually passed without help, without a word, if they could. Villagers would gossip about a stranger quick, rumors packing the alleys before supper. This one wouldn't be any different. They got to the willow, found the river up an inch, running brown and quick. "You think we'll end up like that?" Rolen asked, flicking rain from his eyelashes. "Dragging wheels through muck." Ser shrugged. "Maybe." He kept his eyes on the water. Rain muffled the world. Even the crows gave up, hunkering down with heads under wings. Ser and Rolen slumped under the tree, both soaked through, neither talking, just breathing, listening, letting the weather pull the aches down into their bones, filling the world from scalp to boot sole. When the worst of the storm passed, they splashed back toward the house. They kept quiet, knowing there'd be questions later, chores waiting, the real world crowding back in before they got fully dry. Their hands and cheeks stung from cold. Mud coated their ankles, and the smell of wet earth clung even after the rooster called from up the lane. The rain let up by the time Ser reached his yard. Ward stood in the doorway, eyes narrowed, whole frame hunched against what he couldn't control. "What'd you get up to?" Ward called, voice cut flat. Ser shook water from his coat. "Helped a man with his cart." Ward grunted, sniffed, not approval, not quite blame. "You eat?" Ser nodded. Ward jerked his head at the stove, where soup simmered, thick with barley and what little carrot hadn't gone black. Ser stepped inside, peeled off his coat, and let the heat sting his fingers. Ward watched him, silent. The lamp smoked. Rain rattled what was left of the tin on the roof. It felt like the whole world huddled in on the edge of that moment, wet, emptied out. Ser held his bowl in both hands, feeling the ache of the day's work, roof overhead and nothing more. Outside, the storm eased, and for a time there was nothing but the low scrape of spoons on pottery and the half-light of another day closing down. The soup's warmth moved down Ser's chest to his legs, slow and thick. He scooped the last dregs from the bowl with bread gone soft at the edges. Ward snuffed at his own bowl, blowing steam clear, eyes fixed on nothing. Rain dripped from the eaves, but the wind changed, bringing hush instead of clatter. The room felt less crowded when they ate this way, side by side at the table, noise outside louder than anything said within. Ward reached for the bottle under his chair. He filled the cup less than halfway, hands steady for once. "That man you helped," he muttered, not a question. "He go to Bell's, or further on?" "Didn't say," Ser answered. Cart looked empty, he was tired. Ward tapped a finger on the wood. "Too many strangers these days. Some come looking for work, most come running from something else." His jaw clenched. "If he comes back, don't open the door." Ser didn't nod. He wiped the bowl clean, set it on the table, then stood to rinse it. Ward rose as well, stomach rumbling with the meal, not pain. "You hear anything out there?" Ward asked. The turn sudden. Ser considered. Just the river up. Cartwheel broke. Sounded right." Ward moved to the door, arm braced across the frame, checking the yard. He grunted. Ser set the dishes to dry. The chores comforted him. Simple, repetitive. Each thing in its place. Each scrape and rinse a reason to stand near fire instead of Ward's silence. Ward came back in. "If rain keeps, river might flood the lower fields again. Dig the west ditch in the morning. Use the long spade, not the hoe. Deeper, this time." Ser only nodded. The lamp flickered. The little home held its heat, but the way the sound of the rain returned every few breaths told him the storm wasn't finished. He tucked his bedroll close to the wall, checking for leaks. The sky outside went dark purple, then black. Ward kept to the chair, staring off, drink untouched. When he finally moved, it was to the pallet he kept next to the kitchen, knees cracking. The bottle sat full, cup beside it. Some nights, that was all the difference between calm and trouble. Ser lay in the dark. Wind pushed water through narrow cracks, made the rafters creak. He listened, ear pressed to the ground, to the quiet talking of the river. Thunder far off. Street dogs barked, tiresome and close. His own eyes stung. The crust of sleep gathering in the swollen corner ward had marked 2 nights before. He touched it, felt it pulse, then let his hand fall away. Sleep filtered in, not deep or peaceful, but enough. He woke with dull light, the promise of more rain. The house was damp, breath misting as he rolled up his bedroll. Ward already had the kettle on, back to Ser, shoulders hunched in a way that meant aches and little patience. "Heat, and get to the ditch," Ward said, no greeting. Ser dug into a crust, drank tea that stung from being steeped too long. He gathered his jacket, a patched thing more whole than cloth, and hefted the long spade. Outside, the mud sucked at his heels. The river's voice had grown, a slow, heavy drag, pushing past its banks at the lowest spots, where rats dug holes and pulled young beans down by the roots. He worked the west ditch, cutting deeper, wide, as Ward insisted. Each shovel load pulled at his back, mud stuck to his boots, the spade handle worn smooth from old hands. His breath smoked in the morning cold, sweat already thick under his shirt, mixing with rain that stung through holes under his arms. A slur of crows huddled on posts, watching him. The fence still held Rolen's scare, bones clacking, feathers limp with wet. Now and then it shivered, and the crows would lift, circle, and come back, not fooled for long. Ser took a break, kneeling by the open runnel, sucking wind, hands raw. He looked over his work, a line fighting flood, nothing more. The village woke late under rain, the roosters sounded thin, doors creaked, as people scanned for news. Roland's voice called through the fields bright and out of place, echoing up from the bend in the lane. Ser wiped his brow and watched as Rolen came up with his usual hop, boots caked near to his knees. "You see him?" Rolen called. "Not quiet." "Pooh," Ser spat. The stranger from yesterday. He was at Belz's shed, trading story for stew. Said he'd seen the river gods, had a scar along his hip from fighting, goblins or maybe smugglers. Belz laughed him out, but he's still poking around. Ma says to keep doors bolted. Ser pushed the spade in harder, turning over wet earth. Ward said the same. Rolen stood beside him, small hands in pockets. "Want help? My uncle's gone off to the mill. No chores left but minding hens, and they're hiding from rain." Ser nodded, handed Rolen a smaller spade left beside the field. They worked slow, not talking much, hacking the ditch deeper. Rain eased halfway through. Mist hung over everything, field, fence, river. At the edge, Balu and Viti crossed with their own gear, swinging buckets and making noise for no one. Lavu followed, a net rolled under his arm. They saw Ser and Rolen. Balu raised a fist in greeting, breaking the silence that worked its way into everything on rainy days. He called out, "Town's half flooded. Old man Sarah's pigs got loose. You coming?" Ser searched Ward's window for a sign. None. "When the ditch is done," he called back. Lavu smirked. "That'll take all day. Eh? Race you." Viti kicked mud, sending it spattering. "Loser buys at market next week, if the bridge holds." The boys laughed, but there was edge to it, hunger and boredom and the stir of something new behind their joking. Rolen dug faster. "We can finish. Let's go after." His face was red with strain, but eager. Ser leaned into the work, letting Roland keep pace. They finished the ditch, boots cake-thick with mud, arms trembling from effort. They followed the others into the village, past hedges bent by weather, dogs nosing for scraps, eyes at every window. The stranger's story travelled faster than his steps. Men and women mouthed secrets, children warned to stay in, Stu kept close to the door, so no hungry face could smell it from the lane. Ser felt the shift in the air, old days repeating, trouble bending the village's quiet back until it threatened to snap. Rolen stuck tight, whispering plans for rafts, for new traps, for ways out that could work if only the river ran low for a week or two. If only, Ser thought. Nothing ever changed until it did. They moved down the lane, voices echoing up between rough walls and battered doors toward whatever the day would bring. Ser and Rolen marched after Balu, Viti, and Lavu across the slough that passed for the village's main road. Their boots squelched, mud caked to their calves. Rain had churned up the lane, and water cut grooves where cartwheels made ruts. It was easier to walk the edge, where coarse grass held the soil together, so they hugged fence lines and dodged chicken wire twisted low near the stumps. At the market end they found people out in spite of the weather. Old Sira cursing while she swung a switch at 3 thick-bellied pigs rooting under her apple tree, a knot of women hauling water in battered tin jugs from the well. Balu and Lalu flanked a loose pile of lumber salvaged from the last storm, poking for anything straight enough to use as a fishing pole. Viti shouted something about market treats and got told off by a mother picking through what root vegetables could still be found. When the boys clustered together, their voices nodded, trading news quick and hard. "You see him?" Balu said, pitching his voice low. "They say he's at the smithy now, asking after spare iron and shade. Nobody knows whose kin he is." Lavu rolled his eyes, sending water through his hair. "Don't matter, he's got no horse, so he's not running from any law. Pockets are empty, so Ward won't have any work for him either." Viti fished a cracked plum from his jacket and split it with a pocket knife. "He's not alone either. Someone saw him talking to the miller's wife last night, but she said nothing about it when Dar asked." Rolen pressed into the group, careful not to draw much attention. "You think he'll stay long?" Balu gave a shrug. "If he finds coin, sure. If not, he'll move on, once the road's dry." Ser kept quiet. He scanned the square for a glimpse of the stranger. No sign, just the black mouth of the smithy stretching behind anvil smoke and a boy pumping bellows. Up above, the clouds turned the world flat as slate, edges blurring where roofs slumped into grey. A commotion started near Belz's stall. The butcher, elbows slick with fat, argued with a round-faced man in a sailor's coat. Ser caught phrases as he and the others drifted closer. "Don't know him. Slept in your shed, didn't he? If he pinched my cleaver." Arguments here never lasted. Gossip cut them short, replaced by the thrum of 100 smaller worries. The stranger was not at the stall. Viti whistled low, slicing the silence. "Folk here scare easy." Balu leaned in, voice half mocking, half fearful. "Old Sera swears he's marked, left hand gone white from old frostbite. They say that's keeper sign in the northern valleys." Ser's ears pricked up. Old wives' tales bled into mornings like these. Any hint of the keepers, old wounds twisted into myth. He kept his face slack, hiding any flash of curiosity. Lavu snorted. "Sarah's got a tale for every new face. Remember last year, she said the mill's new scullery boy was a demon. Boy couldn't count to 10, but he could muck a stall." A pause hung over them, a bracing chill. Rolen broke it, nudging Ser's arm. "You want to check the river? See if the raft logs washed loose?" Ser nodded. The other boys caught the signal and peeled away, leaving the square behind, the storm of small rumours fading into the steady beat of their boots on wet grass. They cut across the meadow behind the tannery, heading for the slow bend where the logs they had salvaged had been stashed weeks before, hoping for a break in chores, a chance at mischief bigger than pond fishing. The short grass made walking easy, save for spots where hooves and feet had pressed mud into pockets. At the bend, the river ran quick and high, grey light shining on crests, logs and rubbish gumming up at the first snag. They picked their way down the bank, picking out their own marks in the bark. cuts made with Balu's knife and a half-burned cattle brand Viti had found. 2 logs remained where they'd left them, pinned by thorn roots, bark peeled by the flood. "We could drag them up today," Lavu said, "if wool doesn't catch us." Balu grinned, eyes bright under dripping hair. "If he does, we say they are for patching the fence. No sense letting all his curses go to waste." Ser put his hand on the nearest log, feeling the weight, the work it would be. He glanced back toward the tannery, nervous that Ward might stroll by at just the wrong time. Rolen scrambled down the bank, shoes slick with mud, more eager than the older boys. "Give me your belt," he said, and Balu handed it over. Rolen made quick work knotting the strap around a root, looping the rest to the log's notched end. "Pull together," Ser said. They heaved, mud slipping under boots, arms burning. The log rolled up to dry ground, bark scraping thin lines on exposed shins. Second log followed, slower. Every few moments, one of the group would slip, curse, then scramble back, hands muddy but stubborn, unwilling to let a little rain send them home empty. A figure appeared at the top of the bank, shadow sharp even in the grey. The stranger stood, watching wordless, coat hanging off bone. Silence cut sharper than wind. The boys straightened, panting, hands clenched on rough wood. "Taking my raft?" the stranger finally asked. His voice was not quite a threat, not quite a joke. Ser met his gaze. Cutley's last months. For ourselves. A beat passed. The man's mouth bent, some old pain or humor twisting at the corners. "Row careful. Currents run different under rain." Balu tried bravado. "You ever cross here?" "Not with anything worth losing," the stranger replied. "There's a shelf in the shallows. Step wrong, and your raft'll spin. Take this bank instead." He pointed downriver, where stone gathered beneath slower current. The boys hesitated. Grown men rarely gave advice in town, not to the likes of them. The stranger's eyes ran over their boots, the lines of their arms, their hands wrapped tight with twine burn and weather. "You build it right, you might get clear to cellar. You build it wrong, you'll wake up in the dead marsh with the keeper's ghosts." Rain picked up, flattening any last words. The stranger slipped away, as sudden as he'd appeared, boot prints dark in the mud. The boys looked at each other, uncertain. Lavu set his jaw. "We build it better than last year." Balu laughed, shaking out his arms, fear draining out in the sound. "We don't die, we don't learn." Ser traced ripples off the rocks, weighing the words. The stranger's warning pressed in with the weight of river, sky, and all the small, dangerous hopes that came of being young, muddy, and determined to get across no matter what waited on the far side. They got back to work. Under the threat of rain and watchers' eyes, the raft pulled together, brown water rising, logs slick. The world closed in to the sound of rope pulled tight, breath steamed out and cold bursts, mud and bruises and the throb of new plans gaining shape beneath the clouds. They didn't move for a minute. Each of them caught breath or spat mud, lungs still fluttering from cold and close call. Rain slackened over the river, thinning to mist where sunlight caught it. Rolen wiped grit from his hair. Balu checked an ankle that had twisted on a root. Viti hunched over, arms wrapped around his knees, grinning at no one. Lavu rocked back, staring at the pink scrapes blooming on his knuckles. Ser blinked mud from his lashes, blood from the edge of his eye, stinging as it mixed with dirty water. He thumbed the wound, wiped the rest down his sleeve, and sat up. The current still carried splinters of log downstream, vanishing around the point. There was nothing left to salvage. They hauled themselves to standing, water streaming from their boots. Their coats hung heavy, shirts clung to backs, making every movement stiff and raw. Ser checked each face. Nobody crying, nobody angry, just wide-eyed and run-through, a kind of wildfire jittering behind each gaze. Rolen started laughing, a mad, hiccuping sound, and the others joined, one after the next, until even Lavu barked something that might have been a cheer. "Let's get home," Balu said after the laughter wound down. "Ward'll have my head for losing that rope." Viti winced. "Your head? If my ma sees the shirt, she'll tell me twice, once for the mud, once for the rip." They limped up the bank, squelched across the grass, coming behind sheds and rowan trees to keep out of sight. Going through the square, wet and filthy, would bring questions, and questions got back to parents. For now, they wanted dry clothes, hot food if they could steal it, and maybe a blanket by the stove before the bruising set in. Lavu checked over his shoulder, wary. That man was watching us, kept one eye on the water, one on us. Ser shrugged. "No harm in it. He told us about the shelf." "And Qual told us after you'd already started," Viti muttered, but not with any real blame. In the lanes, muddied folk glanced out, judging likely trouble versus old news. The butcher's window had fogged over again. Men drank in the back, hunched like dogs around bones, while mothers yanked kids from the ditch, ordered everyone inside before supper. The sky greyed again, hinting at another wave of rain. Ser peeled off at the lane near home, pressing mud from his sleeves, hair plastered flat. Ward's silhouette stood in the lean-to's shadow, pipe glowing orange between quick drags. He spotted Ser, didn't move, didn't call, just watched. Ser slipped inside, boots off at the door, every inch of him heavy with river stink. Inside, the fire had been built up to a hot rolling bank of coals. Bread crusted on the stove's flat, and a kettle of beans let out slow, thick burps of steam. Ser stood for a minute, feeling the heat, not yet ready for what came next. Ward sat at the table, turning the pipe stem in his hands. He watched every drip slide from Ser's collar to the floor. "Lose something?" Ward asked. Ser didn't lie. The raft went, river spun it out below the shelf. Ward eyed him slow, mouth tight. "And my rope?" "Gone with it." A long silence. Ward's knuckles went white on the pipe. "Nobody drowned?" "No, sir." Ward stared, weighing the fact. His rope mattered, but a body floating downstream would matter more. He grunted and looked to the window, as if that could settle it. Search stripped off his soaked shirt, scrubbed himself with rough cloth, then slid dry clothes over skin still itching from mud and cold. The wounds throbbed. Elbows skinned, bruise bleeding at the edge. He poured tea, hands rattling on the tin, then slumped by the stove, holding the cup to his cheek. Ward tapped the ash from his pipe, voice softer now. "Next time you test a river, check your knots. And don't take what you can't put back." Ser nodded. Heat seeped back into his bones. He ate beans with salt and lard, scraping the bowl clean, jaw aching from the cold. Ward filled his own mug and sat by the window, watching the dark pile up across the fields. Neither said much. Ser listened to the drip from the eaves, letting the ache in his body replace the sharp nervousness of the morning. The house settled under the familiar weight of quiet, the kind that hid old tempers, and made room for a full belly and a safe floor. As dusk pooled in the corners, Ser thought of the river and the stranger, the way the current cared nothing for rope, wood, or boys earning scars. He let his thoughts wander, tracking the bruises on his body, each one a tally, proof he'd made it through another day. River flung, but back in place. He went to bed before Ward finished his tea, boots and socks set neatly by the hearth. He lay on his pallet, eyes on the ceiling, watching dusk sift through cracks, listening to Ward move, slow and heavy, breathing in and out long after the lamps went dark. Rain started up again, harder this time, hissing along the roofline, pressing every bruise deeper until the only thing left was warmth and a gentle sting of skin. The promise of another wet morning. Morning crawled in, grey and wet. The rain had let up, but fog pooled thick over every furrow. Ser woke with soreness running from neck to ankle. He sat up, slow, testing each limb before he trusted it to carry his weight. The house felt cold. The fire long died down to ash, and the smell of beans lingering stale in the heavy air. Wad was up, boots by the door, pipe in hand. He nodded at Ser, face still caught between anger and something softer. "You've got work. The fence by the lower fields come loose. Pigs'll get out first time their noses find mud." Ser nodded, didn't argue. He wanted to slump back under the blanket, sleep another hour, but Ward's tone didn't allow it. He scraped together the last of the bread for breakfast, chewed quick, and hauled on his jacket, one sleeve sticking to the scrape where a plank had caught him the day before. The yard outside was slick with mud, puddles shining dully among the ruts. He checked the chicken pen, 2 eggs, the rest of the hens fluffing wet feathers and glaring out at the grey. He left them to their bad mood. He found the fence sprawled in a shallow arc where the current had undercut posts. One by one, he drove stakes back in, packing wet earth around the base, tying boards off with what rope he could salvage from the shed. Thin stuff, not meant to hold a pig with half a mind to run, but all they had left since the raft had gone. Roland's voice cut through the quiet. "Heard you all got soaked yesterday." He appeared at Ser's side, rubbing mud between his palms, face pinched with a small bruise running along his cheekbone. "Yeah, lost the raft. Ward's rope, too. You catch it from your uncle?" Roland shrugged, eyes on his boots. He said, "Next time I lie about chores, he'll set me to picking nettles until my hands can't close." But he wasn't too mad. Said everyone gets a taste of river at some point. They worked side by side, fixing rails, keeping their eyes down. Ser could tell Roland's mind was still on yesterday, the cold water, the logs breaking loose, that spot where the stranger had appeared, then vanished. Roland cleared his throat. "You think the raft's stuck somewhere?" "Carried down by now," Ser said. "Maybe buried in the marsh." Roland nodded. "Think we'll try again?" Ser smirked, more hope than certainty. "Maybe, when the river runs lower, or if we can get more rope." The two kept at it until the posts stood half straight, rails patched into something that'd pass an inspection from a tired uncle, if not a determined pig. Balu strolled up, boots caked, hair flattened by sleep, working a crust of bread between his teeth. "Anyone else's folks out for blood?" he asked, eyes poking at their faces for a shared answer. "My pa just grunted and fixed the stove," Lavu called, coming from across the oats, sack slung on his shoulder. He said, "If it ain't broke, break it, so you can learn to fix it. Don't know if that was meant for me or for you." Viti pushed through a hedge, clothes clean for once, though his hands were purple from berry stains. "Eat before you show up, Balu, or you'll never grow into those big words you sling." For a while, they set shoulders together, fixing fence, passing quick grins and snatches of quiet humor. The world felt washed, lighter in spite of bruises, chores, the disappointment of the lost raft. A roar of voices rose from the village square, sharper than morning clatter or usual market noise. Ser and the rest stalled, glancing up. A woman ran past the end of the lane, shawl askew, calling something they couldn't catch. Viti nodded in that direction. "Let's see." They wiped hands and boots quick as they could and trotted through mud into the open square. The crowd pressed tight near the smithy, farmers, mothers, children with bare feet sinking in the muck. At the front, someone taller than the rest, the stranger. He stood back to the forge, hair tangled wet, coat patched at every seam. His hands moved in calm gestures as he spoke, voice raised to cut through questions. "You think I came here for trouble? I lost a wheel. You gave me bread. You think that's crime? I've seen worse river towns than Tuitoma, trust me. You let me be, and I'll move on, soon as the sun dries the road enough for my boots not to stick." Old Sarah pointed her stick, chin quivering. "Folk go missing every time someone new passes through. Last time, Mara's hen vanished, and old Bart was found crawling down by the ferry with half his hair gone. Troublemakers hide behind bad luck." The crowd muttered agreement. Children pressed close to mothers. Only the smith kept quiet, hammer in hand, letting the stranger face the talk. Balu leaned close to Ser. If they run him off, he'll just camp upriver. We'll still have to see him every time we fish. The stranger's voice never rose. You want me to go? I'll go. But storms don't care who's here and who's gone. Flood'll come with or without my say. Someone in the back shouted, What's in the pack then? The stranger loosened the knot and showed wet blankets, a tin cup, a stub of candle, no weapon, nothing to steal. Murmurs faded. The smith finally spoke, quiet but clear. If he does wrong, we deal with it. Until then, let the man dry his boots. No one cheered. The crowd simply melted, each to their own worry, eyes still flicking back at the stranger, each boy and girl and mother and old man making their own list of reasons to remember a face or forget it. Ser and the others slipped away as quick as they'd come, heading back through the now empty lanes. Lavu shook his head. Folk need someone to blame every season. Flood, lost cow, or stranger with wet feet. Rolen scooped a pebble, tossed it end over end. You think he's keeper-marked, he said, not joking. Ser shrugged, feeling the scrape beneath his sleeve. I think he's just passing through. Balu nodded, slow, half convinced. Let's hope the river runs someone else in next time, someone who brings rope. Mud splattered their boots as they trudged back for chores, the stranger's face lingering in their memory, a reminder of how easy it was to be marked, to have your troubles named by someone else, to be chased from home just for needing shelter in the rain. Ser felt the scrape on his arm, the ache in his side, the weariness of another day just beginning. He bent to the fence and started work, boys beside him, sun trying and failing to break through the new clouds. The noon sun broke through sludge-colored clouds, spilling a watery beam across the fields. It brought no heat, just a grey glare that stung Ser's eyes. He shrugged his jacket higher, scraped muck from the gaps in the fence line, and tossed another slick stone toward the ditch, hoping for the clunk of it hitting water instead of mud. The others kept at their chores, Lavu trekking fence posts upriver, Balu fetching barbed wire from a pile stashed behind the granary, Viti flattening a tin sheet by jumping it under his heel. Rolen, smallest but quickest, ran relay for nails, handing them out one at a time from the battered sack at his hip. Crows circled, far overhead, their shadows whisking over the new mud. Ser watched them, thinking briefly of the raft, of all the pointless work that had gone into it, of rope lost and bruises earned, all for a few breathless seconds afloat, before fear took the rest away. By early afternoon, the fence ran mostly straight again. They had more posts than patience, but not enough wire. Rolen held what was left of the sack's supply, fingers blackened, cheeks pink. He handed Ser a nail, then squatted at the corner stile, worrying a stick into the earth. I could fix this with a different kind of trap, Rolen said. Maybe a basket. If I could get more willow twine. Make it so the pigs push out but can't fit through. Foxes get caught, though. Ward would curse louder. Ser half smiled. Ward curses whatever gets caught. Pigs, foxes, boys. The nail bit the wood. You ever wonder what you'll do next year? Roland asked, not meeting his friend's gaze. If we're not stuck on fences and wet beans. Don't know, Ser replied. He straightened, wiped grime from his brow. Maybe work another field. Maybe not even be here. Roland looked up, hope fighting through worry. Go to Sailor? Further? Somewhere different. Somewhere not so weighed down. He picked at the flesh on his palm, felt the dirt grind soft places raw. Balu came up, scowling at Lavu's pile of posts. We got enough to last through flood. Should be done before supper. Viti stood, brushing crumbs off his hands. Mark is dead. Nobody bought a thing. Strainer was still standing by the smith, wouldn't say a word to anybody. Lavu rolled his neck, spat in the dirt. He'll either leave tonight or wait for stories to die down. You ever notice how folk forget all about trouble once they can eat with both hands again? Ser said nothing. He watched the field's edge for movement. His uncle's lean figure, A stray animal, anything that needed rooting out before dusk. Ward hadn't shown since breakfast. The house windows stayed dark, shadows pacing behind the curtain like restless moths. Rattle cut through the breeze, hooves up the lane, wagon creaking. The boys craned to see the source. It was old Bart, hair still patchy from some fever, poncho flapping over hunched shoulders, leading a donkey with 2 sacks thrown over its back. His wife walked alongside, her face lined like cracked leather. They avoided the boys' eyes, focusing on the rutted road, keen to mind their own fortune and not borrow anyone else's. People got used to looking at the ground in Tuitoma. Looking up too long gave you ideas. Sia pulled another plank into place, pressed the board down while Rolen nailed it fast. The rhythm settled him. The ache in his ribs and shoulder made sense in this small world, just for a bit. Wind caught a curl of smoke from the chimneys, dragging the village's smell over the wall. Sweat, stew, long dead fire, the reek of boiled cabbage. Balu glanced at the sky, measuring time. Sun's still holding. You want to try fishing again? I'd take a splash over another hour stacking posts. Viti shook his head. Not after yesterday. That river's up. You lose a line now, and you'll lose a hand with it. Lavu grinned, teeth bright beneath the grime. You're scared. Just say it. My da used to say, better a fool with dry feet than a clever man floating home. The argument played out as it always did, nobody really wanting to stay behind, but nobody strong enough to call for another risk so soon after being scraped from the rocks. Ser let the banter ride, feeling his limbs slow, sweat drying cold. Across the field, Ward's shape took up the open space by the door, pipe stem clamped between teeth, hands folded against the gathering chill. He watched but didn't speak, eyes running over the boys and the fixed line of fence beyond. When Ser caught his gaze, Ward nodded once. Not quite a blessing, not quite an accusation. You think your uncle's mad? Rolen asked, following Ser's stare. Ser shrugged and started packing up the leftover wire, metal stiff under his raw hands. He's always mad. Rain, river, market, there's always one more thing. The work wound down. Fence closed, tools gathered, hands scrubbed in the cold trough until the dirt ran off and only small red scars and scabs remained. The boys headed for the lane together, trading leftover bread and splitting a pair of dried plums Balu had nicked from a loose crate by the market. Sun lowered through the haze, painting light long and yellow across any unbroken patch of ground. At the crossroads, Lavu clapped Ser's shoulder, careful this time to miss the bruised side. You coming by Viti's tonight? Ser considered, hunger twining around his ribcage. Ward would expect him home unless a chore came up. He didn't bother asking out loud. Ward's rules could be guessed by how long the light stayed in the kitchen window. Rolen peeled off for home, promising with a grin to bring the last coil of wire back in the morning. The others carried on, boots leaving thick prints in the lane, dust mixing with the memory of rain. Ser watched them go, then started his way back. The square was empty. The stranger was gone from the smith's shadow. The only sign he'd ever stood there was a faint heel print in the churned mud and an old scarf balled up in the corner. A grey cat sniffed at it, tail high. Ser's stomach knotted, anticipation turning to a kind of hollow relief. He reached his house, steeled himself for the slow close of evening. Ward's sharp look, the clink of spoon against pot, the dull scrape of feet over old floorboards. Life shrank to the routines that never gave peace, but at least asked nothing more dangerous than showing up on time. He stepped in, boots thumping gently so as not to wake old anger. Ward looked up, nodding once without a word. The day had held. No new disasters, not yet. Ser let his guard down, just a little, as dusk smothered the last of the sun outside. Inside, work warmed and exhausted, the future shrank to the distance between hunger's end and the next morning's mud. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and cabbage. Ward had left the window shutter cracked, letting a sliver of cold slip in. He sat at the table, bowl in front of him, slow chew, head down over his meal. The stove rattled in the corner, filling the room with a heat that never reached Ser's toes. Siak scraped his boots on the threshold, careful not to leave mud tracks. He hung his jacket by the door, shivered once as sweat cooled on his skin, then crossed for the kettle. Ward slid the stew pot toward him. A crust of bread floated in thick broth. Beans, a grey onion, no meat tonight. Heard the fence held, Ward said, voice steady. Didn't lose a pig. Ser nodded, spooning stew into a cup. The ache in his arms deepened when he gripped the handle, every scrape a reminder of the day's work. He sipped, heat burning a path down his throat. Ward watched him for a moment, pipe smoke drifting between them. I'll mend the roof tomorrow. Storm left a leak by the chimney. You help. It'll go fast. Ser didn't protest. Helping on the roof meant hours off from weeding or chopping. It left his feet clean. He nodded again, chewing bread that stuck in his teeth, jaw working at a dull rhythm. They ate in silence, the only sounds the scrape of spoon against tin cup, the click of Ward's pipe, wood shifting in the stove. Out in the lane, dogs called and a wagon bounced past, wheels grinding on the stones. The usual noises. No sign the day held anything different or dangerous. When food was gone and bowls rinsed, Ward pushed back his chair, weight heavy on his bad knee. He filled his pipe, tapped tobacco into the bowl, then settled again, gaze fixed to the glowing coals in the stove. Ser took the cue. He knelt by the fire and fed scrapwood into the mouth, nudging embers to life. The warmth spread, made the room seem less like a stable and more like somewhere meant for people. Ward spoke, not loud. Folk'll calm down about the stranger if nothing goes missing tonight. Ser poked the fire. He's gone already. Ward's mouth twisted, not fully convinced, but not ready for a fight. One less thing, then. A long pause. Ward tapped ash into a chipped mug, blew smoke toward the ceiling. You want something more than this. The question hung, not cruel, just hard, like all his questions. Ser rested hands on knees, thinking about the raft, the river, the bruises from yesterday. He let the silence stretch. Sometimes. Don't see where else I'd go. Ward snorted, half a laugh. Nowhere's any kinder than here. It just shows its teeth a different way. Ser grunted. There was truth in that, whether he wanted to hear it or not. Ward stood, joints cracking, and climbed the narrow stairs to his own cot. Before he stepped out of sight, he called down, Don't let that fire die before you sleep. Day 1. Ser kept watch on the flames, feeding them slow, head sagging as eyes blinked shut. Heat and the ache of bone drew him near sleep. He pressed his back to the wall, let the stove's glow fade to coals. He didn't dream much, just the river, cold and wide. Logs spinning rapid through the mist. He woke twice to the sound of rain. Once to the howl of a distant dog. Each time he checked the room, the window shutter, the low sound of Ward's breathing on the floor above. Each time he found everything as it should be. Just the small, safe order of a house after hard work. No stranger at the door, no new disaster. He drifted down again, fire hot at his feet, and let the day empty out of him by inches. Morning came slow. The house carried the close, burnt smell of last night's fire, wood having finally burned low to ash, and pipe stems. Ser rolled from his blanket, body bent stiff with aches that had settled deep. He spent a minute watching dust swim through the first crack of daylight, listening to Ward breathe heavy upstairs. No urgency today, no pigs loose, no storms tearing the roof free, no neighbors howling about lost chickens or muddy footprints through the square. Just chores, and the feeling that comes after work's been done enough times to leave the whole place changed, even if nothing shows. Ward's boots sounded overhead. He came down, tying his belt, pipe tucked in the corner of his mouth. He paused behind Ser, looked out the small kitchen window, then nodded, wordless at the sun creeping up the east wall. Ser filled the kettle, stoked the remnant coals. He set the pot to boil, swept crumbs from the table, and divided what bread was left into 2 rough hunks. Ward watched without complaint. Kitchen tasks were a sign the boy knew what was needed, not a reason for speech. They ate and drank with no hurry, just chewing and swallowing, letting the morning settle. Wind pressed light against the glass. In the yard, the old hen picked through ash, searching for bugs. Ward stood, empty cup in hand. "Let's seed the roof, then the north gutter," he said. "Rain's off today, but won't stay gone. Up and down'll be the death of my legs some day." He set the ladder to the eave, testing rungs with a boot. Ser followed, arms full of patched shingles and a leather pouch of nails. He climbed behind Ward, moving slow, careful over the rotted slats. On the ridge, chill winds stiffened their fingers. Ward pointed with the pipe stem. "Right, there's the worst, cracked all the way through. You take that side." Ser set to the work, prying loose the broken tile, fitting another in. Hands nimble from so many seasons of this same repair. Ward did the gutter, scraping moss, clearing twigs. Now and then he worked beside Ser, showing with small, blunt gestures what deserved a second look, which patch might last the season, which board ought to be yanked and burned. From the roof, all of Tuitoma stretched. Patched homes, staved fences, grey river waiting for new rain. Children's voices rose faint. Someone drove cattle past the old smithy, and a dog whined at something no one could see. Ser found a rhythm in fetch, pry, fit, and hammer. Sweat cooled on his brow, stinging in the breeze. He timed his breath to the drive of each nail. Ward worked silent, sometimes humming a nameless tune, pipe bouncing between his teeth. They finished half the seam before Ward's knee forced him down. He brought water with a grunt, passed the jug without looking for thanks. Ser poured a measure, let his arms rest across bent knees, staring at the shifting light on the field rows. On the ground again, they checked the gutter's run, booted aside the leaves. Ward tapped Ser's arm with his knuckle, a nudge more approval than scold. "You done a good job. When I'm dead, you could rent yourself to half these houses and eat better than I ever did." De half smiled, shrugged, not ready to picture Tuitoma without Ward grumbling beside him. He wiped his hands on his pants, then wandered the edge of the fence, checking each plank he'd pinned the day before, thinking how easily water or time could undo any work, how each nail held the world together only until the next storm. The day drifted on. Ward busied himself sharpening a hatchet, then splitting a few lengths for the stove. He never made a show, kept his back to the window any time he noticed Ser watching. Around midday, Rolen appeared at the fence, one hand waving, the other cradling a coil of salvaged wire. Ser waved him in, signaling to skirt the mud patch near the trough. Roland's face carried no trouble, just bright curiosity, still asking without words whether there'd be time for play, invention, or talk without grown-ups. They found a place in the yard's lee, knees pressed to their chests, backs to the warm wall. Rolen uncoiled a wire, set it down. Got it from the river, near sailor crossing. Some trader lost half his load last week. Thought we could use it. Building something new, not just patching the fence for Ward. So reached out, ran fingers along the wire. Thinking traps, or something better. Rolen shrugged, hopeful. Trap if we must. Or maybe more hooks, fishing lines, something of our own. I broke up an old clock, could turn it into a bell for the gate, make some use of what washes up. They sat in silence, watching the chickens, the sweep of wind through grass, the slow gathering of cloud for next week's rain. Many were grown, you going to stay? Rolen asked. Not just for today, but for the years neither could see. T1? Ser ran his tongue over a nick in his tooth, stared at his hands. Don't know. World's got more fields than Tuitoma. Maybe I'll go. Or maybe it'll all be mud and fences wherever I end up. Rolen nodded, chewing his cheek, wheels in his mind spinning behind his quiet. If you go, I hope it's somewhere you can use a hammer and a mind, not just a hoe. Snorted, looking sideways at his friend. If I make it out, I'll write you a letter. Tell what's different, what's the same. Rolen grinned, satisfied by the promise, even if he suspected such letters only landed in dreams. They let the rest of the day burn slow. Tasks followed one after the next. Ward called Ser to heft water, scrub the trough, close the shed. By sundown, arms ached, but the yard stood right. Roof patched, gutter clear, fence tight for tonight at least. At supper, stew-filled bowls again, no meat, just roots, but enough. Ward offered Ser extra, which he took. No questions. When the coals died and Ward went up to his bed, Ser lay flat on his own mat, staring at the wobbled reflection of fire in cracked window glass, the world outside fading to quiet save the rustle of leaves and wind pressing west. Sleep found him like that, belly full, muscles worn, mind neither at peace nor at war, ready for what little rest would hold before chores and river and hard questions returned with the dawn. The next sunrise came with a thick blue haze. Mist hovered knee-high along the fields, muting every sound except the rooster's lonely crow and the splash of water from the well. Ser pushed out the door into cold that woke every bruise from the river crash, the kind of ache that was as much memory as muscle. His boots tracked rippled prints through dew. He rolled his shoulders, blew into his hands, and crossed toward the lean-to for axe and bucket. Ward's voice drifted from inside, low but sharp. Bring back enough kindling. Stove's burning low. Ser grunted acknowledgement and passed through the thin strip of woods that bordered the plot. Along the edge, he paused. Someone had been there. A basket of broken branches, boot prints pointed away from the house, a smear of muddy cloth tangled in bracken. He stooped, checked the ground. Nothing missing that he could see. Just the quiet, the press of woods, and old tracks swamped by rain. Ser swung the axe, splitting logs on the fresh stump he and Ward had set last year. The sound cut across the morning, echoing between houses starting to wake. Smoke lifted through scattered roofs. Dogs sniffed the ground close to the door, wary of fox scent after a string of missing hens in recent days. The rhythm settled his mind. Raise, swing, crack. Each log smaller than the one before, each blow steadier. He gathered a pile, mounded it in his coat, and trekked back through the grass. Inside, Ward crouched by the stove, poking at dying embers. "Something out there?" he asked, not glancing up. Ser shrugged, dropped wood in the box. Tracks. Maybe Bart's boy hunting mushrooms again. Nothing looked off. Ward nodded, not pleased but not worried either. He pressed the fire to life. A touch of warmth found the kitchens dim. Rolen sent word, said he'd be along later with that spool of wire and something new he wanted to show. Told him to make it quick, rain's coming back. Ser nodded. He poured oats in a pan, stirred as they cooked, eyes tracking wind against the shutter. 2 crows dragged themselves over the yard, wings ragged, calling something harsh and lonely. Breakfast finished and shared in quiet. Ward refilled his pipe, and Ser shouldered out, determined to have the cows seen to before the drizzle returned. The air was damp, full of the coming weather. He checked the fence once more, tight where patched, loose in places he'd meant to get to later. He tested the chicken gate, watched the hens gather for crumbs, and paced once around the yard for any sign of disturbance. By mid-morning, no trouble yet found him. Rolen showed up with the wire, hands full of a battered tin, proud as ever. "Made a bell for you," he said, holding it out by the loop. The handle was a bent spoon, the striker an old nail. "Gate swings, wind moves it, makes a racket, wakes you up before hens do." Ser looked the piece over, nodded sincere approval. "Wald'll claim it's his idea." Rolen grinned, pleased. "Let him. We'll know what..." They fixed it over the old gate, looping wire twice through the frame, setting the bell to spin with every gust. Roland fetched stones to weight the bottom, and Ser tested the clapper, rang sharp, enough to summon Ward from the far room. He stepped out, squinted at the sound, but said nothing. While Roland worked, Ser asked, "You see who cut through the field this morning?" Roland shook his head. "Nobody I saw. Mill's quiet, Hurt not moved yet. Might be the stranger again, but he hasn't shown since the smith." A pause. The air between them tightened. Every boy in Tuitoma had learned the rule. Talk little, watch much. Don't name trouble unless you wanted it to come down hard. They finished hanging the bell, set the wire straight, and watched it tinkle as the wind picked up. Roland's pride was obvious. A little piece of invention, something to add to a yard that usually only changed when cows broke loose or the roof caved under snow. "You want to check the traps by the willows?" Roland asked, hopeful, foot scuffing the dirt. Ser glanced at the house. Ward was inside, cleaning the kettles, safer now. "Let's go," he said. They tramped along the fence row, boots sinking in last night's softened mud. The traps were nothing special, just bent saplings with twine loops, baited with chicken giblets left from Ward's last culling. One had sprung. The bent branch hung limp. Snare cut through, nothing in the grass but snapped twine and a few black feathers. "Fox," Ser guessed. Roland nodded, peering for tracks. "He's fast." "Still hungry. Got more patience than any man here." They checked the rest, righted one that had slipped, then crossed to the riverbank, eyes on the muddy slope and the clots of weed drifted by the flood. No sign of the stranger, or anyone else. For a while, they sat on the damp boulder that used to mark the edge of town before the river cut it off from the main road. Roland dug at the moss, thinking on whatever scheme or plan kept his mind moving when chores let up. "You ever want to take the road out?" Roland asked, quiet, not really looking for an answer. "Every week," Ser admitted. "Never get far." Roland nodded. "We could, though. If we had rope and tools and enough bread to last to Sailor or beyond. Nobody would follow except, maybe, the others." Ser picked up a stone, tossed it in the shallows, watched ripples spread to the far reeds. "Maybe one day." The words felt weightless. Maybe a lie. Maybe a wish. They sat until clouds rolled thicker, promising another downpour. Together they made for home. Boots heavy, each carrying small victories and old aches, no closer to the road out than they'd ever been. Before going in, Ser checked the bell Rolen had fashioned. It swung in the new wind, singing sharp, marking time between rain and supper, and the hope, always dim but never gone, that something different could begin if only they found the right moment to start. The rain arrived mid-afternoon, sudden and cold. Fat drops peppered the yard, sending chickens running for shelter beneath the sodden lean-to. Roland dashed for home with his hood pulled low, wire and battered tin tucked under his coat so Ward wouldn't claim it. Ser stood in the doorway, watching clouds flatten the sun and blur the line between fields and sky. Inside, Wood moved steady, dragging a bucket from the stove to the small table, water sloshing with each limp. He eyed the grey outside and grumbled, voice pitched for no one in particular. "Flood'll rot what's left if it keeps up. Beans won't set and roots go soft. We'll be buying cabbage from across the bridge if we're lucky." Stayed out of the way, clearing unused tools into the corner, scraping mud off boots at the stoop. Rain hammered the roof in sharp lines, finding every missed patch along the seam, now 3 drops at the corner by the stove. Now a slow drip through the wall, where last storm's wind had found a gap. Ward went about his chores without complaint, but Ser could see the old man's shoulders hunched tighter than before, each step measured. No storm knocked him off task. Instead, he checked the food barrel, poured flour into a sack, counted beans, and sniffed the cabbage at the bottom of the basket for soft spots. Afternoon dragged. Ser patched holes with rags, tied another board over the leaky frame by the door. Each fix bought them a day or two of comfort, never more. The house ticked with the storm's rhythm, wind bullying the shutter, rain beating without pause. Ward called for stew early, the scent steeping the house in onion. They ate at the table, steam curling thick between them, bowls balanced on bent knees. Ser dragged bread through broth and counted every bite, more habit than hunger. He watched Ward eat, trying to guess what weighed behind the quiet, what to expect at the end of the meal. Ward finished first, set his bowl aside, and looked into the space just past Ser's ear. "You ever hear stories about this place, back before the water turned?" he asked, voice slow. "There was a ferry once, just upriver. My da said men crossed in the dark for work, no lantern, blind trust and luck enough. Folk talked about gods, thick as midges in the fields. Nobody locked their doors." Ser chewed slow, unsure why the old man was talking story on a storm night, but he listened. Stories didn't often make their way out of Ward without effort, or whiskey. Ward looked down at battered hands. No one back then would have run a stranger out in the rain, not unless he'd done something to deserve it. Now all it takes is the sight of a new face for folk to tighten their grip. Ser picked at flakes of bread, words finding him slow. "People get mean when things go missing, when floods take more than they bring." Ward nodded, accepting or forgiving, Ser couldn't tell. The storm pressed in harder, lights in the window gone yellow as lanterns flickered down the lane. Ser cleared up, scraping bowls, rinsing off at the barrel in cold water that numbed his fingers. Ward set the fire, dropped new wood on, shooed Ser from the chore. "Rest while there's time," was all he said. So Ser took his place by the stove, huddling with the last of the warmth, listening to the creaks of the roof, battling the wind. Dusk fell hard, dragging a sheet of rain between house and window. Voices in the lane, muffled by water and wind, so distant now they could have been dreams. A knock came. 3 short raps, cautious, not desperate. Ward stiffened. So did Ser. Nobody came to their door at this hour, not unless something was wrong or they carried news no one wanted. Ward moved first, pipe in hand. "Who's there?" A voice. The stranger, clearer without a crowd. "Just passing, looking for dry. Don't ask for more." Ward eyed Ser a silent warning, then cracked the door. The stranger stood hunched, hat dripping, coat streaked black. Hands empty, nothing more than wet skin and windburn. Ward let him in. Ser stood, muscles coiled by habit, watching as the man shook rain from his shoulders and moved toward the stove's edge, careful to leave the door's mud outside. Ward fetched a mug, poured what was left of the stew, passed it across without ceremony. The stranger sipped, saying nothing, eyes focused on nothing but the steam. When he finished, Ward spoke again. "On through Sela, or just moving to move?" "To the hills, if weather holds. Water's up." Silence pulsed in time with the storm. Ser didn't ask questions. He watched the shape of the man, the way his hands shook just enough to notice, the pale scar under his jaw. Ward leaned, voice weary but not unkind. "If you've done wrong in Tuitoma, don't sleep here. If you haven't, you leave at dawn." The stranger nodded. "No trouble behind me. No luck either." Ser relaxed some, letting the heat find his bones again. The wind sounded less fierce now. Rain softened to a patter. The stranger curled close to the stove, eyes closing, breath falling into the rough rhythm of rest earned by walking hungry. For a while, the only sounds were his breathing and Ward's old boots on the floor. Ser sat up until sleep found him, listening for danger, for comfort, for the gentle insistence that, even here, under storm and strangers, life pressed on, one breath tied to the next. Ser drifted in and out of sleep, eyes open in the dark, body never settling all the way. the stranger's breathing mixed with the creaking stove and the wind grumbling under the eaves. Ward shifted now and again in his chair, boots on the rung, pipe gone out. Every so often he blinked at the window, as if expecting something to move outside, face lined by the faintest glow from the stove's coals. The rain never really stopped, only slowed to fine mist that pattered the roof so softly Ser could hear the stranger's steady breaths. He caught a whiff of travel, old sweat, wood smoke, sour wool, familiar enough to forgive, but enough to keep some part of him awake. The air thickened with the smell of damp clothes and burned onion. When at last sleep found him, it came the way it always did. A cold at his toes, a dull throb in his side, dreams thin and quick. He saw the river rising, saw the raft break again, saw Ward standing on the bank, calling for someone who never turned. Sometime in that long stretch of night, a sound brought Ser awake. Not the stranger, not Ward, but a sharp tap at the glass. He tensed, chest burning, hand halfway to the iron poker beside the stove before his mind caught up. Ward, still in the chair, sat up straight, one eye open, peering from under his brow. Another tap, 3, then 2, like pebbles or knuckles. Ser climbed up, feet bare and silent. He crossed the dirt-flecked floor and peeked through the shutter's slat. Rolen stood in the cold, just outside the fence, rain soaking his hair. He shivered, holding something wrapped in cloth. He must have slipped out while his uncle slept, ignoring the risk. He caught Ser's eye and gestured fast. "Come quick. Quiet. Now." Ser looked back at Ward. The old man hadn't moved, only stared at the stranger, who slept curled by the fire, oblivious. Ser tugged his boots on and slipped out into the rain. Mud sucked at Ser's heels as he cut through the yard. Rolen pressed the wrapped bundle to Ser's chest, breath sharp and urgent. "You awake? Sorry, couldn't wait," he managed, wiping rain from his lips. Ser jerked his head to the side, pulling him away from the window's line of sight. "What are you doing? If Ward—" "It's for you," Roland whispered, shaking out the bundle. Inside was a thin, battered book and a stub of pencil. "Found it in the old schoolhouse, under the boards. It's blank, almost all of it except some numbers at the start. Figured you wanted something not wet and rotten for once." Sarah took it slow, thumb tracing the frayed edge of the cover, something real in his hands. The book's first few pages held a spidery hand, figures, the type old Sarah used to teach. Underneath, blank pages, not even a mouse trail, ready to hold words or sketches or plans for something different. Roland's eyes sparkled in the meager porch light. "Don't lose it in the river." Ser tucked the book under his arm. "Wait for morning next time," he whispered, not wanting to sound as grateful as he felt. Roland grinned and slipped back over the fence, boots knocking quietly on wet wood. Gone, quick and sure as any fox. Ser waited until the dark swallowed Roland's shadow, then crept back inside. Ward hadn't moved. The stranger still slept by the stove, breath rising and falling. Ser placed the book in a crack behind the timber frame, wrapped in dry cloth. He stretched out on the pallet, dirt still clinging to his feet, heartbeat slowing by degrees. The quiet fell back into place, tracing out just another hour of dark. Somewhere outside, the wind rattled a loose shutter. Inside, Ser held on to the weight of the book under the boards, a secret pressed between mud and memory. Something he could use, maybe, to put down proof that his days in Tuitoma had once belonged to him at all. He listened for Ward's breathing, for the stranger's restless shifting, for the slow drizzle of rain threading through the seams in the roof, and kept his eyes on the pale outline of the door until sleep took him into morning. Ser woke to grey light pooling under the door. The fire in the stove was stone cold, the air heavy and still. Ward stood at the sink, pouring water from the barrel over his face, the noise sharp in the quiet. The stranger had already gone. The only sign he'd ever been there was a swirl of mud near the hearth where his boots had dried overnight. Not even a dish out of place. Ward eyed the empty spot and grunted. Gone before daylight. Didn't take a crumb, he said. He dried his cheeks on his sleeve and moved to the table, lighting the stove from the last scrap of fat wood. The kettle went on. He didn't ask where Ser had been last night, though Ser still felt the unease of it in how Ward looked at him like he was weighing lies or making a tally of secrets. Ser fetched bread and cut a half to share, hands working slow. He felt the tightness in his chest ease when he remembered Rolen's book, dry and safe. The spot behind the timber stayed untouched. The knowledge steadied him some. Ward blew into his mug. He'll find nothing but more rain on that road. What a man can walk away from, he'll walk, but the weather keeps coming after. Same as curses. Ser nodded, not sure what to say. Breakfast went quiet. Ward handed Ser work, scrape moss off the east wall, rake stray branches from the lane before the ox cart came through at noon. Ser took the broom, pulled on his boots, and stepped into the wet. The ground sucked at his soles, but the worst of the rain had passed. Above, thinning clouds let sidewise sunlight slant into puddles and glint silver across every broken surface. Sarah got low and started scrubbing the wall, shoulders flexing against rough stone and grit. As he worked, kids shrieked in the distance, their mingled laughter and argument riding the wind from behind Sarah's house. The crows took their usual spot on the fence, indifferent. Halfway down the lane, he found Rolen huddled by the gate, hands stuffed in his pockets, hood pulled over his shock of straw hair. He kicked at loose stones, eyes flicking quick over Ser's shoulder. "Did Ward see you?" Rolen kept his voice careful. No, he didn't care. "Stranger's gone," Ser replied, voice clipped but not harsh. Rolen looked relieved, then curious. "You keep the book?" "Yes, dry and safe." Roland's cheeks flushed with the pride of it. He stepped closer, voice dropping even lower. "Couple of the younger ones saw tracks by the mill. Say he followed the river. Old Bart's dogs barking at nothing up past the willows. You think he'll come back?" Ser shrugged, scraping moss from the lowest stone. "Why would he? Tuitoma's not much of a place to stay when you've got nothing holding you." Rolen pawed at the grass with his heel, considering. "Hope he's not hungry. Haven't seen anyone head north with him." "You think he's really keeper-marked?" Ser shrugged again, pushing the broom hard until green flecked the road. "People say that about anyone who doesn't fit." Rolen nodded, his tone almost hopeful. "Maybe he'll write us from Sela, or further on, just to prove he's not like the stories say." They shared a brief grin, small, private. Ser watched the sun climb, and, for the first time all week, felt the mud starting to dry on his boots. Just then, Balu, Viti, and Lavu rounded the lane, each carrying a different excuse for being out: bucket, shovel, sack of feed. Lavu smirked at the pair. "Fence still holding, or you boys thinking of flying the coop with the next stranger?" Balu nudged him aside. "Whole place is talking about that man. Old Sarah says he's magic. Viti's ma says she saw him fix his own boots without thread. What did he really do, Ser?" Ser kept eyes on his work, shoulders tight. "Ate some stew, slept near the fire, that's it." Viti swung his shovel like a blade. "Means more'll come soon. That's how it starts. Ma says a stranger today, a storm of beggars after." No one said what everyone was thinking. Tuitoma barely fed its own. The sky, clearing in patches now, made the village look smaller, every roofline and scrubbed fence showing its scars. Ser pressed moss from the last corner and dusted his knees, eyes tight. "Nobody's coming for us. Nobody ever does." The others digested that, each in their own way. Rolen, still half a boy and half a shadow, said, "We should fish while things are quiet. The river's up, but not wild." Ser considered the broom, the wall, the work left. Ward watched through the window, not waving, not stopping them. Ser nodded. Down to the willows. But keep close. The group made for the trees, slipping by the back paths, breath carrying the first hope of a new day where rain might end, where the river might finally give up something worth carrying home. Ser's pocket weighed a little heavier, a blank book, a pencil stub, the promise that stories of his own might finally begin. They left the scrub stones and narrow lanes for the overgrown paths snaking toward the willows. Mud clung to their boots, but the ground had begun to tack up, each step holding a bit less drag. The air smelled of dead leaves and river water, the trees trembling with last night's rain. Ahead, small birds sifted through reeds, chasing bugs and calling in bursts. The river still ran, swollen but not crazed, moving fast at the surface, then slow and black below. Balu and Viti shoved through brush first, eager to prove they hadn't lost their nerve since the wrecked raft. Lavu knelt at the bank, eyes sharp for fish finning in the shadows, arms draped over knees. Ser moved last, the book and pencil in his pocket grounding him more than the weight of oar or spade had ever done. Rolen lagged behind him, lifting his boots clean over roots, quiet but watchful. They set their old fishing lines, with knots so familiar they barely looked while tying. Bits of worm and whatever bread crust was left would have to do for bait. The lines hissed as they cast out, floats bobbing between twigs and leaf mats. Nobody spoke much for the first while. Wind swayed the willow branches overhead, making dappled light flare and fade on the boys' faces. Balu hummed under his breath, a tune from the last time musicians had come through on market day, changing the words and laughing to himself. Lavu leaned out far enough to point with his pole. "Fish are thick here. Water's warm from the rain." Viti nodded, squinting at a float that danced. Could be. Flood chased them up, or scared them out. Roland dug at the dirt with a stick, then, after a while, brushed his hands on his trousers. He glanced at Ser, and then nodded at the slim book's outline in his shirt. "You going to write the truth, or the lies, or just the numbers and fence lengths Ward wants?" Ser shrugged, not ready to talk about what he'd do with the empty pages. Maybe both, maybe more. Silence again, soft, easy. Balu pulled in a sunfish, spines flashing as he unhooked it, the first real catch since the flooding. "Not much meat here," he said, voice softening around the tiny thing. "You toss it into stew, no one even knows but your teeth." Lavu caught two more. Grey, slick, eyes bulging. The fish fought, flopped on the grass, then stilled. Each one stacked beside Balu, heads pointed upriver. Viti joined, pulling up a little perch, grinning so wide his cheeks cracked dry. Time slowed in the willow's shade, river noise blending with the whispering grass. Rolen set his pole down, busying himself with rocks. He sorted them by shape, scratched a spiral pattern in the silt, then traced an arrow that pointed downstream. "Ever think about following it?" he said, voice half lost in the wind. Sela looked at the line, the ever-present edge of current, how even a stick or leaf drifted along faster than a pair of boots could manage. "Wouldn't get far on foot. Water gets cold past Sela. River bends, swallows itself, more marsh than road. But—" he let the words hang. Possibility, even just spoken, felt risky. Viti let his guti float out to deeper water. If we all went, maybe nobody would notice for a while. No chores, no fence lines. Lavu frowned. "We'd be found quick enough. Warded, have every neighbor looking. My pa followed the tracks to the first puddle and dragged me home by my ear." Balu smiled, but quieted. "Wouldn't be the same after you came back either way." Ze fished the pencil from his pocket. He opened the book, balancing it over his knees. He didn't write anything, not yet, but held the point above the paper, feeling the promise of what could fill it. Names, curses, plans, a story about 5 muddy boys whose world might only be as wide as the next bend. They filled up a creel with a handful of small fish, enough maybe to show Ward and call it a day's work done. The river rolled on. Wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain upstream, the world opening and closing with every turn of water. When the sun drifted behind the trees and dusk started whispering, Ser closed the book and tied it tight with a bit of twine. They gathered up poles, mud, bruises, hope, and walked slow back through the willows, boys once more just heading home at the end of the day. No one hurried. If the world changed tomorrow, or if it never did, they all walked it together, at least for now, toward the lights of Tuitoma blinking on beneath lifting haze. Dusk stretched itself over the village, turning muddy lanes to ribbons of shadow and setting every broken window aglow with lamplight. The boys trudged home along the half-dry track, boots squelching now only in the deepest ruts. Ser led with the creel, fishtails sticking out limp and glassy-eyed. Balu and Lavu swatted at each other with reeds. Rolen trailed close to Ser, finger resting on the twine that tied the book closed. Even Viti, usually quick with a joke, walked silent, lost in thought as the chill set in. When they reached the edge of the yards, the group split without a word or promise to meet the next day. Each dove for home, heads low, eyes already adjusting to the flickering gold from kitchen stoves and hearths. Ser moved quick, past the dark heap of the smith's shed, skirted the churn mud at the well, and found the Sarrafin door, standing partway open, a sliver of light spilling into the wet dust. Ward had beat him home. From inside, the scrape of a chair and the clink of crockery echoed. Ser let himself in, boots left near the door. Ward sat at the table, back to the wall, stew glistening in a chipped bowl, loaf stubbed down beside him. The air was thick with boiled fish and wood smoke. Ward didn't look up. "You catch anything worth gutting?" Ser dropped the creel by the hearth, lifted out the best of the haul. Rivers slowed, floods gone, fish moving upriver. Ward grunted approval, set down his bread. "You get on those branches in the lane?" Iling cleared. Ser crouched by the basin, washing mud from his hands and arms, cold water biting every scrape. A long silence, while Ser worked the knife through scales. Ward watched, not speaking, but his eyes followed each cut, each flick of the blade. It wasn't a test, just the way Ward marked what mattered. Food cleaned, chores done, the small order of a house that kept itself going even when the rest of the world slipped. They worked side by side as dusk pressed hard. Ward broke kindling, fed the stove, and watched the pot without hurrying. Ser rinsed sliced fish, laid them out flat, and sprinkled coarse salt from the last of the sack. When supper started, they ate with clean hands and little talk. Steam rose, windows glazed with sweat. Ward tore bread and passed half to Ser, kept the other for himself. Outside, rain started again, slow, gentle now. The worst of the clouds had moved off to the west, leaving a quiet that pressed against the glass. Ward finished his bowl first, leaned back, eyes on nothing. "Stranger's gone," he said after a time. Old Bart saw him crossing the marsh road at dawn, headed towards Sela, or the next poor village, with work to spare. Ser didn't reply, finished swallowing, set his spoon aside and wiped his hands. "You lock the gate?" Ward asked, voice lower. "Twice over," Ser answered. "The bell Rolen made had rung twice in the afternoon wind." Ward nodded. He tapped his finger on the table. Slow, the sound muffled but steady. "You got friends enough in this place. Mind you don't pick up more trouble than you can carry." Ser took that in, hearing more warning than comfort. He stacked the bowls for washing, wiped crumbs from the table, then sat a long moment watching the last curls of steam fade into the ceiling's beams. Ward poked the coals, set the kettle for morning. "Get your rest," Ward grunted. "Weather's breaking. Work'll pile up soon as the lane dries out." Ser cleaned up, dried his arms by the hearth. Ward went to bed, up the ladder, back bent. Sheets rattled as Ward settled, and soon the old man's snores rolled heavy through the house. Ser waited. He took out Roland's book, untied the twine, and laid it open by the lamp's dim edge. His pencil hovered, a line, a name, a sketch of a raft, or a plan for a trap. He wrote a date, the way Mrs. Ser used to show, and filled a page with the river's twists as he remembered them, quick and plain. A knock sounded, gentle but insistent, just 2 taps this time. He stiffened, tucked the book away, and moved to the door. On the step was Lavu, hair wet, cheeks ruddy from a run. He held out a bundle of rags, the last coils of barbed wire they'd scrounged and forgotten near the ditch. Lavu shrugged, half a grin. "Didn't want it lost. Spoil it left to rust." Ser took it, nodding. "Come in." Lavu shook his head. "Got chores. Ma wants me home before dark. Tomorrow?" Ser nodded. Lavu went off into the thickening rain, leaving Ser alone on the step, wire heavy in his fist. He brought it in, locked the door, checked the windows. He made sure the bell on the gate was set, that the shutters wouldn't swing loose. He pressed his hand to the book spine where it rested behind the beam, letting the quiet soak deep. In the night, the house settled, and the world contracted to the safe limits of walls, stove and roof, repaired by honest hands. Above, Ward rumbled and turned, and rain ticked a steady song on the fresh patch over Ser's bed. He lay down, feeling the day heavy on his bones, the hush around him neither promise nor threat. Sleep pulled at him while the river grumbled out beyond the willows, and the rest of Tuitoma faded into dark, just one more small piece of history waiting to be written. Next scenes can further develop Ser's use of the notebook, a surprise visit or confrontation, more from Ward's past, or a turning point with Rolen or the village kids. Specify your next interest, or I'll proceed naturally to complications brought by the weather, new arrivals, or choices made by Ser and his circle, always keeping immediate, concrete action and grounded realism. Sleep came heavy, then light. Ser woke 3 times, once to Ward coughing overhead, once to the bell's faint tremble, only wind, and once to the rain tapering off, leaving a stillness that rang in his ears. At dawn, the clouds were gone. Sun pressed tentative gold through the cracks. The house felt different in that light. Walls softer, rats touched by something like promise. Ward thumped down the ladder, boots thudding mud from soles, pipe clenched in his jaw. He moved slow, pain obvious in his winces and the way he leaned into each step. Ser hauled himself up, rubbing the scar at his brow. He listened to Ward breathing as he worked the stove, old lungs rattling more than usual. The kettle spat as it came to boil. Ward stared at nothing, thinking through the day before it began. They ate slow, sipping yesterday's tea and tearing crusts off dry bread. "Fields'll need turning," Ward muttered, voice gravel-dragged. Before noon, before the mud sets hard, he wiped his hands, coughed again. "I'll fix the north wall. It won't get done looking at it." Ser nodded, pulled his shirt on, boots laced raw. He took spade and hoe off their hooks, stepping into the cold. The air had that clean sting that followed a storm, rich with rot and life and expectation. He checked the lane, mud now thick and half-set, streaked by faded wagon ruts. Crows already pecked old seed at the furrows. Where the earth met the last of the cobblestones, Balu leaned against a fence post, chewing a stalk, eyes restless. "You ready?" Balu called. Ser shrugged. Work was work. Balu motioned, trotting along as Ser started breaking the top layer of damp soil. Balu took the next row, neither speaking as the rhythm set in. Each thump of spade and scrape of hoe spaced them in their own thoughts. Sunlight dried mud to clay within an hour, and every footstep left a print less deep. A shout came from the hill, a small figure waving a hat. Rolen darted toward them, breathless by the time he hit the field. "They're pulling logs from the river," he said, "down by the miller's place." Thou replied, "From our raft?" Rolen shrugged, catching his breath. "Could be, or the stranger's cart. Sarah's boys are already fighting for kindling." Ser looked at the line of willows. Let's check at midday. Work's owed here. Rolen didn't argue. He let Ser finish her row, then helped clear rocks. By late morning, sweat shone through their shirts, and the ache in Ser's side pulled hard. Ward wandered the field's edge, hat crushed in his hand, pace uneven. He tapped a plank against posts at the north wall, wiped sweat from his mouth, nodded sour approval at the boys. Before lunch, the three set tools aside, wiped grit from their faces on their sleeves, and crossed the road by the edge of the old mill trail. Down where the ground dipped close to the water, half the village stood watching the river gasp up broken lumber and battered planks. The logs bobbed against the rocks, some marked from work, others new. Sarah's boys argued over a thick beam. It's ours, found it first. The miller snapped, no fighting. What the river gives, it keeps, if you brawl. Rolen crouched low, eyes searching for any mark from their raft. Balu stood back, wary of the scuffle. Ser spotted a tangle of rope, frayed at the ends, wrapped around a plank that once belonged to their jerry-built craft. He kicked it free, mud streaking his boots brown. Ward said not to bring trouble home. Balu muttered at his side. Ser just nodded. The river would keep what it wanted. He left the log for the miller, took nothing but one length of cord and a bent nail, passing both to Roland with a thin smile. Near the edge, old Bart fished a crate from the eddy, shaking river silt from what little was inside. Never know what you'll need, he grunted, teeth flashing, and slung the remains onto his barrow. The boys watched the gathering for a while, then made their way back up the lane, shoes caked but shoulders eased by movement and the sun warm on their backs. Fields waited, shores pressed in. But for a little while there was nothing loud in Tuitoma, just voices, laughter, a river running brown, and the promise that what washed away might one day make its way home, changed, but still known. Ser tucked the pencil behind his ear, mind half on work ahead, half on the blank book kept dry between the walls. The day stretched long, the pain of new blisters already fading beneath sun and mud. When evening came, he'd have a new story to set down, a record of what the river wouldn't take, even if he wasn't sure what it meant yet. Late afternoon settled in with a brew-coloured sky, the light thick and pooling in waterlogged ditches. The fields, worked over twice since dawn, grew soggy, clods giving way under each boot. Ser's hands were raw across the knuckles. Ward's hammered pace set expectations high. Ser bent to the last row, scraping out stubborn weeds, mud streaking his wrists. Ward hovered up ground, deep in thought, shadows darkening every line in his face. By supper, Ser trailed mud into the lean-to, shoulder aching. He washed at the trough, cold water biting, then stepped inside to the smell of onions and stale bread. Ward leaned on the table, knife tracing slices from a block of cheese. The boards creaked under his shifting weight. His knee never fully set after the last cold snap, but he didn't let on. They ate, jaws working slow. Ward spit a rind out the window. Sarah's boys were by, looking for that old saw blade, he said. I told them nothing comes free. Not even rust. Can go for nothing. He eyed Ser. You give away what's meant to patch the wagon, you patch it yourself. Ser nodded, chewed. Rain started soft again, ticking on the patched tin above. The rhythm filled in the empty space between man and boy. After, Ward settled by the fire, pipe between his teeth, tuning out the rest of the world. Ser cleared plates as quiet as possible. Later, Ward pointed a gnarled finger at him. Boy, you're not a fool, and you're not owed a smooth life. You show up, you do what's right, you leave more standing than you found. That's all. Ser wiped his hands on rough cloth, the words echoing in his ear. He wasn't sure if it was warning or blessing. Maybe both. Ward squinted, as if seeing something distant. Going to need you next week. Chihal's got an offer. Wants help clearing the lower marsh. You'll work sun up to sun down. Pay's half gone before you get it. Debt on seed, see? His jaw worked, spit wetting his lips. You old enough, you stay out there. You keep your feet dry. Don't let him pull you into their mess. Ser didn't answer. He knew how work changed hands, how every paid hour was already owed somewhere else. It didn't matter if it was marsh or field, Tuitoma always found a way to call its own back in the end. Night came. Ser spread his blanket on the hard pallet, letting the ache of new work settle his thoughts. He turned to the gap in the boards, slipped the book out, lit a nub of tallow candle, and wrote. Wet again. Field near gone to clay. Chihal wants help marsh side. Ward says keep my feet dry. Balu's got the cough. Rolen still dreaming traps. Stranger gone. Sira's boys starting trouble near the mill. All counted, still here. He pressed the pencil down, letting each word score a bit deeper. The candle guttered. He left the page open to dry. Somewhere near midnight, a howl rose from the near fields. A dog, maybe, but lonelier than most. Ser listened, body drawn tight beneath the thin blanket, the sound crawling under his skin. Ward didn't stir above, but Ser's eyes never closed all the way after. The wind changed. The candle burned to a black wick. Morning came, clear, washed out. No rain, but thick fog pressed flat over every patch of ground. Ser followed Ward into the yard without a word. Today, they'd walk to the marshlands, survey what the Chihals needed, see what could be cleared before the next storm. The path twisted by the river. Mud sucked at their boots. Ward led with a limp, pausing here and there to point out berry brambles, to motion toward a rut that had turned an ankle. His silence was instructive. Step where he steps. Eyes up. Do nothing without seeing the lay of things. As they came upon Chihal's plot, the old man himself stood there, arms crossed, face barely visible under a battered hat. Chihal's sons, bigger than Balu, meaner when riled, worked the edge of the bog, pulling rotting branches from what used to be a pasture. Chihal grunted at Ward. Fields'll kill a man or teach him something. He spat, eyed Ser. That's the Sarrafin boy? Knows a hoe from a harp? Ward's face didn't change. Knows enough. No one shook hands. Chihal pointed with his stick. No majors for this work. All hands and back. Keep your boots, earn your coin. Start where the ground turns black. Stay out of the sinkholes. Chihal took the spade Chihal's boy shoved his way. The handle was slick, worn from 100 grips. No shortcuts here, only stubborn roots, brambles lashing the ankles, and every step weighed by sucking mud. They worked silent. The sun, when it burned through the fog, stung their necks. Chihal's sons grumbled orders. Ward ignored them. Ser didn't look up. By midday, blisters split his palm, sweat salted the lines on his jaw, and the world shrank to ditch, clod, and the next yard gained. The job went long. When Ward finally called time, Ser's arms shook, boots waterlogged. Chihal nodded curt, counted coins into Ward's palm. Back after the next downpour. If you're willing. Ward just grunted, and the two headed home. At the bend, Ward coughed up a line of river mud, spat, wiped his face. You did the job, took nothing for free. Remember, this kind of work gets paid with your bones, not just coin. Sarah said nothing. He stared into the haze, the marsh rolling away to grey, and thought about how the village always circled back. River, mud, muscle, coin, debt, all keeping them rooted, no matter how the years changed. When they got home, Ward sat by the door, boots off, rubbing his knees. Town'll need fixin' soon, as flood season kicks up. Could use your head, not just your back. Zer went inside. Roland's wire bell jangled in the wind. The book waited behind the plank, each day marked and scored, waiting for the next story, stamped in mud and muscle. Outside, Tuitoma breezed another day across the fields. waiting for the next reason to change. The work from the marsh set into Ser's bones for days after. He woke to stiff hands, a low ache curled inside his ribs, and patches of skin scraped raw from shovel blisters. Ward noticed, but said nothing except the occasional grunt as they crossed paths in the kitchen at dawn. Outside, the mud began to recede as sun pressed down and the river quietly lowered. Routine found its rhythm. Fence repair in the mornings, mucking out the pig pen, hauling water whenever it was Ward's turn by village rules. In the evenings, Ser and Rolen stripped bark and twisted new cordage for traps that never seemed to catch more than the slyest old fox. Rolen was always bright with new ideas. Build a weir in the river, set up a net across the lane for sparrows, invent a bell that rang different for animals and humans. Ser did the labor. Rolen made the noise. One night toward week's end, with a faint light holding over the fields and the yard soft with the smell of wet straw, Ser sat on his haunches by the patched fence, Rolen beside him. Over the hill, Viti's laugh echoed. Balu's voice, lower and angrier, followed, then a short yelp and silence. Viti's head popped up above the grass. "He's caught, chased the hens, again," Rolen giggled. Ser just shook his head. "He'll bring the old man down if he's not careful." The boys straggled together under the high branches, sharing what little bread they'd saved from supper. Lavu scratched a bug bite on his arm, staring out over the last row of beans. "Heard at the smithy we might get a festival, if the weather holds," he said. "First since that sickness 2 springs ago." "Something to mark the river going down?" Balu scoffed. "Festivals mean extra chores, and busted teeth if old Sarah tries to dance." Even Roland made a face. "But the minstrels might come," he said. "Stories, magic if anyone passes for it. Maybe a fight if we're unlucky." Ser chewed crust, letting his mind wander. The thought of a festival pulled at his stomach. A little thrill blasted through with the memory of last time. Cakes, games, Ward drunk enough to forget being angry for a whole evening, the square packed, all noise and faces, and the fleeting sense that every boy in Tuitoma might slip out from his place for one night. Night fell thick. Houses shuttered and chimney smoke trailed off. Ward called once from the steps. Nothing urgent, just the voice that signaled bed was expected. Honesty, too. Ser slipped in, found Ward spooning stew into a bowl, content with enough labor done to avoid another speech about lost opportunity. They ate together, the candle pooling light, the night pressing solid at the windows. Ward finished first, as always, and stared long at Ser across the table. "Festival's not for the likes of us. You go. Keep your boots. Easiest place to lose what's yours." He paused, grinding a knuckle into his palm. "If coin changes hands, keep your share hidden. Give a portion to your ma's old tin up in the rafters, still there. You'll need it before long." Ser wiped his mouth, nodded time. Ward went up the ladder without finishing his tea. Ser looked after him, saw the stoop of a spine bent by years along roads that never led far enough away. After the house quieted, Ser took out the book, sketched a wavering line through the crowd. 5 boys under lanterns, faces caught somewhere between men and the children they'd soon forget being. He left space at the margins, unsure what would fill them. Maybe Roland's bell, maybe a face from the road, maybe nothing but the spatter of festival rain. That night, with the roof patched and his limbs humming from the day, Ser slept a little deeper, wind rattling the gutter, but not his heart. The week rolled fast. The sun chewed up the last puddles. Women strung banners, old, reused, faded from the bright red and yellow they'd once been. Balu got dragoon to ferry tables from the meeting hall. Rolen stole bits of candle scrap from every doorstep, boasting he'd make lanterns for their end of the green. Lavu bribed the baker for the promise of burnt crusts, and Viti begged his older sister for boiled sweets, though everyone saw his hand come away empty. Ser hauled brush to the edge of the lane, gathering anything dry for the need fire. Ward sent him with a coin, one for a loaf only, and change or proof or both by supper. At the baker's, Ser waited in line, as Sarah's girls argued in the floury heat, leaving with a stiff black loaf and dirtier boots than before. By nightfall, Tuitoma changed. Torches stood upright along the square, flags whipped. Ward shaved, first time in months. His neck showed scars Ser couldn't remember. The village drew in together, not one house holding back. Even the smith's widow, who hadn't stepped out since the last flood, stood at her door, candle in hand. Ser, Rolen, and the others drifted along the fire lines, shoulder to shoulder, picking sausages off racks when nobody looked, trading kicks and whispers beneath the buzz of minstrels tuning up by the barrels. Someone fired off a bread roll at Balu's head. He caught it, bit off the crust, threw the soggy scrap back at Viti, who howled and ducked under a horse's old tack. Ward found Ser in the crowd, pressed a copper into his palm. "Don't by chance," he said, nodding toward where men pitched dice behind the fish cart. "Spend it honest." Ser pocketed the coin, heart thumping. For once he felt older than the other boys, responsible, seen. Lanterns snapped open overhead, colors trembling in the warm breeze. The minstrels started, the square scuffed hard by boots and bare feet. Music and laughter spilled as wild as the river had weeks ago. Boys drifted off in pairs and clumps, faces flushed, no one thinking of chores or fences. Ser danced, awkward at first, then easy, spun by Rolen under a string of flags, feet light, worries shed for a night. Ward somewhere close, but far enough to let freedom taste real. He caught the bell Rolen made tied above the cake stall, ringing sweet and sharp every time anyone passed. He watched the faces, old, young, marked by rain and poverty, glow, strange and hopeful, in the leaping shadows. He made no promises, as the festival wore its hours down, no plans for escape or return. For once, just presence, the press of warmth at his back, the ache of muscle that felt like gratitude. Before midnight, with the last tune winding out, he tucked another few quiet words in his book, left the rest for the morning, and walked home in the pale, scattered light. One of many, but not alone. Lanterns burned low, but steady, as festival night stretched deeper. The square filled with smoke from fire pits, and the sharp smell of spilled ale. Younger children tumbled in the grass. Old men leaned close and traded stories. Ser moved through the crowd with Rolen at his shoulder, dodging elbows and slaps, the scrape of boots and laughter building under his feet. At the far end, Balu and Lavu argued over rules of a ring toss. Sarah's biggest girl let Lavu win, which meant he had to buy her a barley bun. Viti pocketed half-melted sweets from a cracked dish, looking around for the baker's eye but never getting caught. Ward stood with the men by the torches, pipe dead between his lips, surveying the crowd like a landowner counting fence posts. He met Ser's gaze with a quick nod, a sober warning to steer clear of the dice games and fights brewing near the cider wagon. Ser nodded back, heart tight with the comfort and weight of that brief attention. Music swung higher. The minstrels stamped their boots, set spoons spinning on drums, sang in a language no one here knew but everyone pretended to half remember. People clapped along, some stumbling drunk, most just glad to have lost the feel of a hoe or broom in their hands for a few hours. For a while, nobody seemed tired. Nobody was poor. Rolen tugged at Ser's sleeve. "Come see what I've done," he urged, and pulled him behind the outbuilding where the lane turned toward the river. He pointed to a narrow trap rigged in the grass, almost invisible. "For foxes tomorrow. The tripwire's light, just enough to ring the bell down by Ward's gate. If it works, we'll have every dog in Tuitoma baying before sunrise." It was nothing special, but Roland's pride made it better than the festival's bonfire. Ser knelt, checking the bend of the stick, nodded approval. "We'll all think it's magic if you catch anything before the barn cats." Rolen grinned. "Or he'll curse and blame me for the noise." He looped the wire tight, wiped his hands on his shirt, then leaned against the fence, watching the shadows flicker across the square. A woman shrieked someone's name, the good kind, laughter spilling over it, and music spread on the wind. Ser listened, breathing in the scent of warm bread and tallow smoke, boots twitching to the memory of the last tune's rhythm. Footsteps crunched behind them. Balu bumbled around the shed wall, holding a plum and a broken mug, Lavu a step after. "You two run off to start trouble?" Balu grunted, mouth half full. Rolen shook his head. "We're planning a revolution. You two want in?" Viti caught up next, cheeks sticky, fists tight around a handful of boiled nuts. "Best revolution gets the last sausage, then I'm in." The four stood together, leaning against cold stone, not talking much, just letting the sounds from the fire's edge fill in the silence. Lantern light made each face older, or younger, depending on the turn. A scuffle broke out at the cider barrel. Two men, both with shoulders broad enough to block the path, fell over the bunting line and kept swinging, more noise than real threat. Ward and Serra's eldest closed in, voices low and firm. The fight ended with curses. Nothing broken but pride, and maybe a jaw to be iced in the morning. Lavu rolled his head back, sighed. "Some night. Last time they fought, the fence broke before bones." Ser let himself drift. He pressed the book's corner where it rested under his waistband, making a note for later. Festival scuffle, only pride lost. Near midnight, the minstrels played their last, voices raspy, sunburnt cheeks glossy in lamplight. Slowly the crowd shrank as mothers gathered children, men stretched sore backs, girls wandered home in clusters, and only Ward and a few of the other elders kept watch from the square's edge. The boys moved together down the lane, feet kicking dust as the fires dimmed. At the Sarrafin gate, Rolen paused, face quiet. "You write it down? All this?" Ser nodded, showing just the pencil, not the book. "Good," Rolen said. "Else, no one will believe half of it." Balu snorted, turned for home. "Won't matter. The pigs will get out tomorrow, and nobody'll remember a thing but the mud." The group scattered in twos, and then alone, each swallowed by the dark and a day's hard-earned exhaustion. Ser stepped into his house, boots soft on the floor. Ward had left a wedge of cheese set by a clean mug, an unspoken reward, or just a habit, Ser couldn't tell. He finished it slow, washing down the last breadcrumbs with river water. He sat beside the dying fire, as night faded into the first hint of blue, scribbled in the dark, face warmed by the last stub of a festival candle. His hands wrote it all tonight. Lanterns, fights, music like thunder. No strangers. Roland's bell worked. Ward watched, didn't yell. Lavu's pride bruised. Viti still grubbing sweets. Balu left with a purple mouth and no voice. For once, the world felt full and fair. He closed the book, pressed his palm flat over the cover, and listened to the heavy hush of a village, emptied by sleep. When he finally lay down, the air still smelled of smoke and bread, the quiet filled with festival echoes, feet on dirt, laughter, and the certainty that, whatever the morning brought, it would begin with something worth remembering. The morning after the festival stung with cold clarity. No cloud cover, just brittle blue overhead, and every noise sharper than it had been under lanterns and music. Light leaked through the cracks, painting the floorboards pale. The world outside felt bigger, somehow, stretched thin after a night when all fences dropped. Ser shuffled to the kitchen, bare feet numb on wood. Ward was already up, jaw stubbled, eyes heavy. He sipped hot tea, with both hands clamped around the mug. The house tasted of old smoke, sweat, and fresh dawn. Ward's boots rested by the stove, still muddy from the square. Ser didn't speak right away. He poured what was left into his cup, noting the stale crusts and the half-heel of cheese set aside, last night's wedge, now a memory. Ward jerked, his head at the door. "Pigs got out. Woke half the line screaming at the field. You see Balu's face?" Ser shook his head. Kid looks like he tried to bite a cartwheel. Ward managed a half smirk, then winced and massaged the muscle above his brow. Town'll be full of sick stomachs today. You'd best try to get the fence mended before noon. And check Sarah's barn. Viti went home on the wrong side of the tracks. Rolen's ma was hunting him before sunup. Ser nodded, finishing his tea in silence. Without the music and noise, the festival lingered in his bones as soreness and exhaustion. A good ache, but an ache all the same. Outside, he found what was left from the night. Ashes from the need fire still stank near the square. Pigs rooted at the ditch, snuffling for lost crusts and peels. Lantern glass speckled the grass. Someone's cap floated in muddy water at the foot of the old willow. The boys crossed paths at the edge of the bean patch, Balu scowling and clutching his head, Lavu clutching a split lip, Viti limping from the thigh but grinning, and Roland following with 2 eggs cupped awkwardly in his hands. Lavu poked at his mouth. 50 years from now, bet I remember the taste of that bun more than anything else. Viti hobbled past. You remember getting caught, that's what. Balu squatted down. Pig spooked before I got the gate tied. Sarah's been up an hour cursing me from one end of the lane to the next. You owe me for that fence, sir. Siak ignored him, crouched to gather the broken line, checking where the pigs pushed through. The fix was rough, but with all 4 boys helping, they drove stakes and patched holes with whatever scraps lay handy. Barrel slats, the wire Rolen found last week, bits of rope from the lost raft. They worked quiet, nursing small pains, each breath blowing out festival warmth. Roland handed over the eggs, proud. Found these out by the willow. Only thing the pigs didn't break. You want them for your breakfast? Ser took the eggs, pocketed them. Ward'll thank you, or at least not swear. The pigs, hungry, circled nearer. Balu shooed them off. Back to the pen with you, not getting another treat. As they finished the patch, Sarah's voice rang out from further up the road, shrill and insistent as ever. If I catch you boys cutting through my garden one more time, I'll turn you all to scarecrows, empty bellies, empty heads. They grinned, shrugged, and pushed past the gate, dusting off their hands. Lavu's lip bled a little, but he didn't care. Viti limped softer with every step. Back at the Sarrafin house, Ward was by the stoop, rubbing his knee. He caught sight of the eggs, nodded. Something right in a day's trouble. Ser handed them over, earning a rare, grateful grunt. Ward stepped inside, left Ser on the stoop. The morning air felt honest, sharp, cold, full of chores and smoke. Everything simpler than the rumors and excitement of last night. He checked his palm. The faint pencil mark from the book lingered from where he'd pressed his hand. He'd write it all down tonight. Every bruise and laugh and noise, every trouble that hadn't chased them home. Rolen looped back through the yard, waving as he jogged to meet his uncle at the mill road. Balu and Lavu argued into the distance about the best way to clean blood from a shirt. Viti ducked back toward his mother's, already plotting to sneak out once his limp passed inspection. Seam watched the lane, gathering in the sense that nothing special waited for him, but nothing too bad either. Not while the fences held, and the boys kept showing up in the fields, and the work got done. The festival would fade by nightfall, become another story to nest in the pages of his book. He took a breath and picked up the hammer, set himself to building what could be mended, day by day, patch by patch. Rain clouds hung beyond the north fields, but for the span of the morning, the world was his own. The day moved slow, the kind of slow that settles into muscle, one fence board at a time. One nail wobbled through half-rotted wood, one complaint from Ward at each turn. By noon, Ser's knuckles stung where he'd missed a head and caught skin on iron. He worked quiet, lost in the swing and set of mending, the kind of work that didn't change a life, but kept a house from tumbling in on itself. The sun felt higher than it really was. Steam drifted from the ruts. Down the lane, Roland's voice bounced, half a song, half a list of all the bits he'd scavenged out of ditches, a cracked bell, 2 rusty nails, the bent shaft of a hoe. Rolen sorted each piece at the edge of the road, face crumpled in concentration, his plans bigger than whatever could be done in a morning. Ward stepped out, held in one hand a coil of fine wire Rolen had left by the stove. "Take this to him," Ward said. "Can't have him sneak in for it and trip the bell again. Set it straight." Thurk took the wire down the path. Roland looked up, grin stretching from ear to ear. "You saved it. I thought Ward would keep it for closing chicken coops." "Says rope for the coop. Says next time you set off the bell by accident, you fix the hinge." Roland shrugged, taking the wire and rolling it up careful. "Maybe I'll make a new bell. One only rings when it matters, a raiding fox, or if the baker comes to throw old bread. Ward would trade you a week's dinner for that." Roland's smile twitched. "He'd forget my name if I didn't bug him once a week." Ser bent to help him sift the rest of the pile. "Festival didn't cost you much." Roland shook his head. "Nothing but a sore foot. Ma let me try the sweet cider, worse than river water. I'll stick to stew. I want my head to hurt for a reason." They sorted in the sun, counting nails, arguing over which bits might spark a real idea. A shadow passed. Sarah's big rooster strayed too near, eyeing the pile. Roland shooed it off with a stick, then turned to Ser, eyes sharp. "You write anything yet?" Ser tapped the notebook, pressed into his coat. "Just lines, not sense of it yet. Might never make sense." "Doesn't have to," Roland replied, matter of fact. "We do the work. Write it down, somebody will believe it happened one day someplace." Ser didn't answer. He folded a strip of tin to catch light and slipped it into the book's back page, thinking maybe later he'd write a game they played, or the exact shade of bruised green along Viti's shin. Viti and Lavu joined after lunch, both picking at bread. Balu trailed them, shoulders slumped, hands hidden in deep pockets. "Jara wants that saw back. Says she's got stumps to clear." T shrugged. "She always wants something back," he says. "If we bring her apples in the fall, we can keep the saw till the frost." Lavu grinned, eyes glinting. "I say that means it's ours for 2 months, and hers for a day." They moved as a group to the river, carrying fence wire, shoes, and plans for what might be fixed next. They patched holes in the footbridge using driftwood and Roland's best 2 nails. They cleared brambles from the bank, piling thorns and scraggly grass high, throwing stones at the rats that nested among them. After a few hours, sweat pasted shirts to their backs. The water sparkled in the sun where it passed over stones. Balu stripped his boots and waded in, daring the rest to join. Viti was first, tugging Lavu and Rolen along. Ser followed, rolling his pants to the knee, stepping careful where the stones got slick. The river was cold and fast, but clean, and for a few minutes the boys forgot chores, scrambled to splash each other, all howls and curses and laughter, nothing of work or want. From the far end of the bank, Ward called out, harsh and sudden, "Enough! Get to before you catch sick." His voice cut through the chatter sharper than a switch. Ser scrambled up, breathless, hair dripping, watching Ward size up their work on the footbridge. Ward grunted, spat, then nodded at the repair. "You did better than I expected," was all he said, already headed home. Even after the others pulled out, boots squishing, shirts clinging, bread shared between mud-smeared fingers, the day stretched warm. They lay on the bank, sunlight in their faces, water drying slow. No one talked about leaving, or the stranger, or debts still owed. Time moved, but the world waited, wound tight, and in that hour nobody minded anything at all. They parted when the sun dropped, each to his own house, mud-caked on legs, the river's pool steady behind them. Ser made for his door, notebook safe in his pocket, head full of words and hands empty of fear. He slipped inside, Ward's heavy tread behind the stove, marking safety and work, and the end of another day. The wind had turned, carrying a promise of rain, and maybe, just maybe, something worth writing about next. Night fell slow and straight, cold air following the line of the river into every crack and seam of the Sarrafin house. Ward set a small log on the stove, coaxed the flame to life, dropped stew bones in water to simmer for tomorrow. The kitchen window rattled. Rain threatened again out in the west. Ser sat on the stool by the table, boots off, trousers stiff from dried river mud. Ward pulled the coat from his shoulders, grimaced at a pain in his hip, but covered it with a cough. He ladled the last of today's stew, thin, mostly roots and salted fat, into 2 bowls, handed Ser one without a word. The kitchen hummed with low warmth and steam, the quiet between them filled only by the scrape of spoons and the ticking stove. Ser ate slow, licking salt from his thumb, still tasting river and sunlight on his teeth. Ward's gaze fixed on the fire. It was the comfortable sort of silence, the house bound together by the business of eating and staying warm. After a while, Ward cleared his throat. "Chihal sent for me, wants hands for the mill. Grains rotted in the lowest bin. More work, less coin for it." He didn't expect an answer. Ser nodded. "You want me to go?" Ward weighed that, staring at the bottom of his bowl. "Not unless the fence comes down again. This mill won't close without every family tossing in." He looked tired, but the edge of worry never quite left his mouth. "Don't cross him, Chahal. Don't cross his boys." Ser nodded. They finished eating. Ward stacked bowls, rinsed them in the pan, then limped to the door to check the latch against the coming rain. He stood there, pipe in hand, looking out into night. Ser sensed more on his mind, but the old man kept his thoughts pressed down. Ser fetched his notebook, slid into the corner by the stove in the spare candlelight. The family was done with talk. Now was the hour for grinding pencil, marking out lines. He flipped to a fresh page and listed. Bents held, bridge patched, water low, Rolen's bell still on the gate, Ward cut in hip, Chuhal's boys want more than coin's worth. He sketched the bend of the river, the run of the fence line, the spot where Rolen had scattered trapwire and where the fire from festival night still stank in memory. He wrote the sound of Balu's laughter when Viti fell in the water, the way Lavu's lip split and healed clean. He let the words trail, notes without poetry, lists without lies. Rain began as faint static, growing steadier on the shingles. The house breathed in, breathed out. Ser sharpened his pencil, set the book aside, and listened to Ward pace in the narrow hallway, boots soft against the planks. Before bed, Ward spoke, voice low. "You do your work. You keep your pride. Nothing wrong with that. Not in a place where the river doesn't care, unless you prove you're too stubborn to drown." Ser didn't speak. He crawled under his threadbare blanket, let the words shake out the last hint of festival, then slip away to the hush of water on the roof on his bones. He woke sometime near dawn, cold pressed in hard. Ward rustled upstairs, coughing until the house shook. Ser looked at the window. Darkness, a slash of moon, the bell on the gate swinging with every gust. Somewhere in the yard a dog barked, maybe Bart's, maybe one gone wild. Ser kept still, listening for trouble, the kind that sometimes slipped into the yards after rain. Nothing came. He dozed again, then woke when first cold grey pushed through the window. Ward was already in the kitchen, boiling what tea could be found, face drawn, anger worked out, only fatigue left. Ser pulled on boots, rubbed the ache from his wrist, and crossed to the door. Rain slacked, the world outside slick and fresh. The fields waited, sopping and shining, earth turned over with last week's labor. Rolen was there before the sun cleared, hair stuck with sleep, one eye still puffy. He moved quiet, careful with the latch so Ward wouldn't bark. He held a new tin thing, spinning on a wire, the latest attempt at keeping crows from their beans. "Try this?" Rolen said, voice low, grinning. Ser took it, spinning it with a flick of the wrist, the dull shine catching just enough light. "You never stop," Ser mumbled, half smiles showing. "Can't, not while Ward keeps feeding us his stories about the old world." Rolen shrugged, hope sparking behind the fatigue. The boys set out to the field, crows already lining the fence, watching for mistakes. In the coming days, the rain fell again, washed thin by wind that carried the sharp scent of frost from the high woods. Chores stretched. Patches, hauling, shoveling, shoring, all without fanfare. Old men kept to the fire. Young ones listened for work and for news from upriver. A new child at the mill. A cousin sent off to the market. A rumor that Chahal's second son had been knocked senseless in a fight nobody saw, but everyone heard. Ser wrote it all down, slow and careful. Tales of weather, work, and laughter. Detail by hard detail. Each day another notch cut into history's bone. The world went grey and brown again. Another day, another cold morning. And boys who walked the lines, always expecting something harder, but never quite broken by it. End of the week, the mist hung thick at sunrise, sinking over the fields and the half-rotted fence. Frost licked the edges of the grass, turning mud crisp for an hour before the sun worked it loose again. Ser walked with Rolen along the main road, boots leaving paired marks near the ditch. All week the work stayed steady and the quiet grew heavier, house after house pouring smoke and worry into the morning air. They passed the root shed, the one old Bart had rebuilt after the last storm, and Rolen pointed out a row of tiny footprints. "Fox, got something again." Ser nodded, noticing tufted fur by the gate, a reminder that not even fences held their line forever in Tuitoma. At Ward's place, chores had slipped into routine. Roof patched as needed, stove fed, pigs penned behind a gate with new hinges Roland had managed to fix so they didn't rattle every time the wind picked up. Ward's limp was worse. He moved with both hands braced against the table for a moment before pushing upright and muttering about old age, about the way the world wore through flesh, same as it did boot. Roland left his latest invention, a twist of wire and tin meant to clang when crows landed, hanging by the window. "Take it," he said, shy but hopeful. "Might keep one more mouthful in the ground." Ser watched him go, a lump in his throat when the door closed, the boy's outline fading with the mist. He put the contraption outside, let it spin in the wind, listening to its hollow tink as crows scattered overhead. Inside, Ward sat at the table, leafing through a scrap of worn paper covered in figures. "Chital wants another week's labor out of me, out of you too. Says he'll pay on time." He spat to the side. "We'll see if his word holds better than his fence." Ser sat, warming his hands on the mug. Ward pushed his way. For a while, neither spoke with more than a grunt. The air in the house was thick with fatigue, bone-deep, the kind that doesn't lift after a meal or a sleep. "You write in that book?" Ward asked, not unkind. He nodded. "Every day. Little things. Nothing to fill a page, but enough to remember what was real." Ward sighed, long and low. "Good. You keep it close. There's a use for every memory, one way or another." Outside, crows swept the bean rows, and the sun burned higher in a thin patch of blue. Lavu's shout carried from the far lane, someone chasing a runaway pig, laughter behind it. The world still moving, no matter how many days, felt the same. By noon, Ser had finished mending the fence again, this time with better nails. The men from Chihal's spread came down the path, calling Ward and him to bring spades, help dredge the irrigation ditch one more time before the cold really set in. Ser went, shoulders squared, the weight of the week settling evenly as he followed, boots sucking in the first thawed patch of earth near the mill. They worked, quiet, grunting through the mud. Chihal's boys boasting, laughing, one of them nursing a swollen hand from the latest fistfight. Rolen drifted at the edge, sharp-eyed, always finding something worth saving among the debris, one good nail, a splinter of glass for a lens. a rag to pad against the cold. When the ditch was dug, Ward collected the pay, muttered a thanks that wasn't gratitude, just acknowledgement of a transaction closed. They shared a hunk of dark bread, half frozen and sour, by the water's edge before trudging home. The sun was falling. At the fence line, Ser and Ward paused, shoulders touching, for the space of a breath. Ward looked sideways, jaw set, voice gone even. You keep doing what you're doing. You keep your head down, but not so far you miss what's coming for you. Nobody's giving you a thing in this life. You take the work, you take the blows, but you hold to yourself. Ser nodded. He watched the wind set Rolen's latest invention to spinning, flashes of metal dazzling back at the low light. The crows stayed clear for inside. Ser stowed his boots by the stove, penned another line in his book. The air changed today. Roland's bell worked. Ward walked slow, but stood straight. Chihal paid, but not in comfort. River held, field held, eye held. Night fell, cold and clean, the lamp's yellow glow flickering over the rough floor. Ward dozed in his chair, and Ser lay by the fire, the book close, the tired lines of the house drawn in solid, and for tonight, quiet. Outside, the village settled, smoke rising from every chimney, every life turning down for sleep. The sound of the wind in the wires, a low thread, promising more of the same, maybe just enough, come the next dawn. Ser woke deep in the night, the fire only a weak glow under the kettle. Ward lost to sleep's heavy tide above. He lay still, listening. Nothing but creaks in the roof beams, an old owl hunting among the crows. He was warm enough, stomach full, legs sore, but his mind spun slow and certain. He listened to how the house breathed, settling between storms and labors, filled with the leftover presence of everyone who'd ever lived and worked here, still here, even when quiet pressed in tight. He pulled the book from behind the log pile, careful not to scrape the boards. In the dark, he ran his fingertips over the cover, counting dents and nicks, a physical memory of every week and day. He found the stub of pencil, working it loose, and wrote just by touch. A-coming. Beans in. Fence tight. Roland Bell doesn't ring for foxes anymore, only sunrise and rain. Ward says, take what you can, don't ask. I don't. I write it, that's asking enough. He stopped, listening harder. No rain on the roof, no wind. Just the thick blanket of quiet that covered Tuitoma when everyone slept. He let the book fall shut, tucked it against his chest, and thought of tomorrow. More digging, more mud, another thing to break and fix again, another joke from Lavu and complaint from Balu, another meal hard won. Rolen, bright with a new idea, would be waiting at the gate. Ward, slow but awake before him, would point to whatever had failed overnight and expect the world put right by nightfall. Pierre lay on his side, knees drawn close, feeling all of it. The ache, the expectancy, the thick pulse of life in small things. If nothing changed for a month, or for a year, he'd be here for it. If something big broke, if one river flooding or one fight in the lane brought real change, he'd be here then too. He listened to Ward's breathing overhead, the breath of the house, and the rhythm at his chest as the pages pressed a steady pulse against his ribs. He closed his eyes, letting the night sink in, waiting for the bell to ring at first light, waiting for another day the same and not the same, another chance to mark the record before it washed away. In the cold outside, the crows shifted their weight on the last bare branches, feathers tight against the autumn wind, their silence giving way to mourning without warning or complaint. CL let the quiet have him. No promise, no dread, just the dark. The soft clutch of hard-earned rest, and the knowledge that in the morning work would wait and he would meet it. He slept, steady as earth.
Thank you for listening to Stellar Shock, our immersive audiobook podcast. If you're enjoying the adventure and wish to support us further, please consider joining our Patreon community at patreon.com/vertical. That's patreon.com/VERTICLE. This episode of Stellar Shock is a production of Vertical Media, LLC, all rights reserved. Produced and edited by our talented team here at Vertical. The fabulous theme music was created exclusively for Stellar Shock and is used with permission.
Vertical Media. Soar must be the storm.